call to order the April 19th meeting of the West Sacramento City Council, Redevelopment Successor Agency and Financing Authority. We're going to begin tonight, as we do each week, with the Pledge of Allegiance. So we'd like to invite our guests to join the council and staff in the pledge, which tonight is going to be led by James Reeder, who's here from Boy Scout Troop 1, fulfilling a merit badge requirement in order to become an Eagle Scout. So James, lead us in the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. The council did meet in closed session this evening to confer with our labor negotiator regarding negotiations with all city bargaining units. No action was taken. That brings us to our general administration agenda, item 1A, which is presentations by the public on matters not on the agenda, but within the jurisdiction of the City Council. As is noted on our published agenda, item 1A provides an important opportunity for a public forum, but state law does prohibit us from taking action or having a discussion about items that are brought up under this public comment period. We do ask that anyone wishing to address the council on that or any other item this evening to please fill out one of the yellow cards. It's available near the front door, and to turn that card into the city clerk. In front of the clerk is a timer that we use to make sure that everyone gets a chance to be heard, and to that end we ask that all comments be limited to no more than 3 minutes. Also in front of the clerk is a flip chart that simply indicates which agenda item the council is currently considering. We take the yellow request cards all the way up to the conclusion of the staff report on any one particular agenda item. So once the staff is done with their presentation and the council questions or the public testimony have begun, we don't take any additional speaking requests. So if you're here on a specific item, please be sure to fill out the card as soon as you can, but definitely by the conclusion of the staff report. We also recognize that for some folks, speaking in public can be a nerve-wracking, anxiety-ridden, welt-causing experience. And so to that end, we ask that there not be any boos or cat calls or even other applause or other demonstrations, and we try to maintain a civil discourse here in the chambers. So with that, we have no requests to speak under item 1A, so we're going to proceed directly to item 1B, which is council communications. Are there reports or other communications? Councilmember Sandine.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Age-Friendly Advisory Committee met yesterday, and we continued to have to hone the Age-Friendly Action Plan. We focused yesterday on the implementation portion of the plan. We also heard a report about the city's active aging program and learned that our program received an award from the California Parks and Recreation Society. We received the Creating Community Award for our intergenerational volunteer program. We also were reminded that the Senior Resource Fair will be held on Friday, May 5th at the West Sacramento Community Center from 10 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. And Mayor Pro Tem Johannesson, who also co-chairs that committee with me, may have more to add during his report. I also attended the swearing-in ceremony for our new Deputy Chief of the Police Department, Rob Strange, yesterday and offered congratulations on behalf of the council. Quite a few dignitaries were in attendance, including our own Yolo County District Attorney, the Yolo County Sheriff, and the new Police Chief from Winters. And then on Monday evening this week, our fire department held its 2017 award ceremony. There were 4 promotions that evening, including our new Deputy Chief, Steve Benz, who was sworn in, and they were all celebrated, as well as the swearing in of our new citizen at large on the Disaster Council, Alexis Casiado. Awards were also presented to CERT volunteers for Firefighter of the Year, EMT of the Year, community service, life-saving efforts, and outstanding service and achievement. And then I think for me, super emotional on Monday night, Lindsay Dyer of the department, she shared her personal story of how after she experienced heart failure while she was out on a jog during her lunch break with our department, she shared her personal story about how bystander citizens, our fire department and police department and healthcare professionals saved her life and when she collapsed. And there was a SAC-B article, if you haven't seen it yet, that I would encourage you to read about her experience. It was really inspiring and kind of shared how precious life is. So that was a wonderful, wonderful ceremony on Monday. And finally, I participated in a Greater Sacramento Certified Champions program for elected officials on April 7th. I would highly recommend this to my colleagues. when the next opportunity presents itself. Greater Sacramento, of which our city is a member, focuses its efforts on increasing our region's competitiveness for business attraction and also on marketing our region to showcase the benefits of locating businesses here. Greater Sacramento focuses on data to use both as a dashboard to understand our position in the marketplace and also for continual improvement. We also got a behind-the-curtain view of how site selection happens for businesses that may be looking to locate here and what Greater Sacramento is doing to position us better. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And you probably know this, but AARP has invited us to present at their national conference on livable communities. I'm flying down to Los Angeles to speak with the national vice president of AARP based on the work that both of you and the task force have been doing. I see Charlotte Marks is here. He's been featured in at least one national AARP publication, West Sacramento, and this issue, like so many, has been small but mighty in just getting stuff done. So thanks so much to the two chairs for your leadership in bringing to life an initiative that's really important, but that a lot of other cities took on at the same time as us and have not gotten nearly as far. So thank you, and thanks to John and the staff for following for the great follow through as well. Councilmember Orozco.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On April 12, 2017, I participated in a Board of Directors meeting for the Regional Sanitation Board. We received an update on the Echo Water Project, the quarterly report for January 1st, 2017 through March 31st, 2017. We essentially received the update on the work progress, expenditures, accomplishments, and other major activities. The Echo Water Project has, some of the progress has been slowed down due to the heavy rainfall this winter that was unanticipated. However, after a presentation, we learned that the operation and construction challenges posed by the wet weather do not appear to be significantly impacting the overall program schedule or the budget at this time. I wanted to give a reminder to West Sacramento residents that there have been discussions about rate increases, and they are anticipated. But as I had reiterated before, regional sanitation offers low-income customers a savings of $90 to $150 per year for relief in bill pay. So in order to get more information on how to apply, please call 916-875-5500, or you can fill out an application online at regionalsanitation.com. And that is based on annual income and the amount of people in the household. Second, I visited the Learning Ladder. There's an art exhibition at the community center currently, and I encourage everyone in this room and everyone who's watching us on television tonight to pay a visit to the community center. As I mentioned in a few meetings ago, we had a partnership, the City of West Sacramento has a partnership with Waste Management, where we are teaching our youngsters how to recycle, reduce, and reuse by using what normally people would call garbage and recycling them into toys. They have an exhibition, and their artwork is extraordinary. So it's right outside of the Lanise's Express Cafe at the bottom of the community center. And it is a fantastic thing to bring your children to, as you could encourage them to recycle and inspiring a new era of reuse. Finally, I also attended the West Sacramento Police Department's boxing camp, which took place last week, April 10th through 13th. First of its kind, and it was an amazing experience. The 4-day event included approximately 30 children from West Sacramento, many of whom, actually all of whom, were chosen specifically by our West Sac Police Department school resource officers, the Washington Unified School District, and the Collings Teen Center. The kids that participated got a variety of different experiences, including boxing training, self-defense, as well as other types of lessons, including resilience, choices, ownership, and leadership presentations from a variety of speakers. The speakers included Uriah Faber, Art Pimentel, Kevin Bracey, Coach V, Dr. Nicole Clavo, and myself. I presented to the children on Friday about leadership. But I just really want to commend the West Sac Police Department for this proactive effort in reaching out to kids in our community. I saw nothing but smiling faces, people who were inspired. Two of the children were awarded recognitions based on their efforts and their commitment toward the four issue areas, the four leadership and resilience, choices, and ownership. And it was just really inspiring. There were over 100 adults, including many of the parents from the community who were very proud of their children and excited to see them go through a program like this. And from what I understand, we're going to replicate the program in the near future. So I do encourage everyone to at least keep your eyes peeled for an announcement and participate if you have an opportunity.
Great, thank you. Mr. Ledesma?
Nothing to report.
Mayor Pro Tem Johannesson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Yellowstone Air Quality Management District met this week, and we went over the 2016 ozone season review. We also looked at a proposed change to Rule 2.31, which deals with volatile organic chemicals, compounds, and these are basically the Air Quality Management District regulates solvents and things of that nature. We also looked at the planning process for the upcoming regional zoning throughout the region. Today, the Yellow Housing met. One of the main items on that was the approval of moving forward with 820 Beamer Street, which is going to be an 80-unit supportive housing project in Woodland, which I think is going to be the first of its kind in the county of this type of project. The 10-year Planning Commission also met. We received our first draft of the 10-year plan revision, and for those who may recall, this has probably been 5 or 6 years ago when we had an initial draft of the 10-year homeless plan, and it really became unworkable. It's just the meeting schedules weren't working out, and it was very difficult to implement. Now we're looking at more of a housing first, and looking at kind of the coordinated efforts that they're doing throughout Yolo County with the different organizations to deal with homelessness, including the Homeless Poverty and HPAC, Homeless and Poverty Action Coalition. And also, just on the age-friendly meeting that Councilmember Sandine mentioned, I'd like to also thank staff and John Robinson in helping this. It's a very, it really is gelling. We've got to the point, we've got 20 action items. Of course, they haven't all been adopted, and there's still, still would have to come to this body if there's any funding. But we actually have, for each of the action plans now, plans for implementation, the metrics that we're looking at developing for these. And I think it's very, very well organized, and it's going to be very easy to communicate as well. We're looking at outreach to the community on exactly what this plan is going to do and how it can impact individuals. So I'm very excited about it.
All right, and I met earlier today with Charlotte Marks, so that should confuse me. I meant to recognize Charlotte Dorsey for her work on the ARP and Livable Communities work. So, Councilmember Roscoe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have one more announcement to everyone in the room. We have an upcoming event here at City Hall. It's on Friday, April 21st at 6 p.m. The Yolo County Children's Alliance will be hosting its spring event. It's an Aloha event, but the proceeds from this fundraiser will go to serving underserved children in our community, as well as child abuse prevention. As you know, April is Child Abuse Prevention Month, and so any efforts toward this end are going to a fantastic cause. So if you can join us, again, this Friday, 6 p.m. in our City Hall, a band called Unsupervised with a particular council member in the band will be there playing, and we will have the sail-in catering. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Great, thank you. I have a couple of reports. First, wanted to acknowledge Congresswoman Matsui, who joined myself and the city manager and Kate Jacobson yesterday for a tour of the Southern Riverwalk, the Bridge District portion of the Riverwalk, and with a particular focus on some processing and permitting issues that we're dealing with the federal government for the art piece that we commissioned and is just about ready to go. And so she wanted to get deep into the well, there's no weeds to get into because the goats have eaten them all. But she wanted to really understand the context of the place, and she's as usual she's stepping up to be a really terrific advocate on issues big and small for us. Last week I traveled to St. Louis as part of a national working group of mayors looking at innovation districts. This is physical places in cities where startup and other innovation ecosystems are targeted and focused, and where the whole ecosystem of those come together in terms of venture funding, accelerators, incubators, both early stage and later all the way up through first series and beyond, but matching also with place and. So St. Louis, surprising to me, maybe not to others, is one of the exemplars of this work in the country. And so a dozen of us went there for 2 days to understand better sort of how they're accomplishing the work there, which has been remarkably successful at creating a broad range ecosystem that has supported the development of a wide array of startups and kept them there as they proceeded through their series of funding funding rounds. As usual, there's mostly cities of 250,000, 500,000 and larger, but and part of the reason that we were invited is that we've actually had conversations at the most superficial level already about the potential of innovation district planning. Folks who've been on planning commissioner on the council for a while may recall that some of the property owners in the Pioneer Bluffs, for example, at one point floated an innovation district as a concept, but not really with the full range of what's involved in developing the full ecosystem. And so learned a lot in this session around the two models in St. Louis, one of which is a very heavily university-led model, taking advantage of the university's proximity there to older industrial areas that had low land values and were therefore ripe for redevelopment into a concentrated play around innovation. When they and the Brookings Institution, which is the host of this working group that I participate on, kind of understood our geography, and our proximity to UC Davis and our land situation and some of these other older industrial districts like the Pioneer Bluffs, there was a lot of interest in this as a potential replication a potential replication model. And so that was one of the significant reasons why we participated. So I've got lots and lots of documents and other information to share with our staff team and with other folks in the community around how we might be able to move that forward. Yesterday I participated, I'm a member of the Food and Agriculture Innovation Council for Greater Sacramento, the organization that Councilmember Sandine was just describing, and that council specifically around how to promote innovation in the food space that supports both startups and attracts innovative companies in their work in that area. And already the St. Louis lessons were paying dividends in that process because, frankly, the work that we've done on that ecosystem work has not been that sophisticated in our region. West Sacramento was one of the early homes of one of the first technology incubators in the region, the incubator led by Charlie Soderquist. But never at the full range of that ecosystem. So yesterday, again, there was a lot of interest in here as being, one of the region's prime opportunity areas for food and ag innovation, and really focusing our efforts around not just corporate recruitment, but around jobs development through the support of the startup ecosystem as well. So some positive developments. I also last week attended the Mayor's Water Council. This is the national council of mayors that are working on water policy issues and frankly, mostly on wastewater and stormwater policy issues. Our focus has been principally around negotiations with EPA, around the regulatory frameworks that tend to drive costs for municipalities through the roof around wastewater and water treatment and stormwater. We also deal with the Water Council around levies and other issues, and that's been my principal leadership role there, and on floodplain management. But we're at a moment where we have some opportunities with the new federal government, but they're fraught with peril and with danger around rationalizing some of the regulations that just don't make sense. And we have plenty of those in the water space. that are largely driven by antiquated and silo EPA philosophies around how the regulatory environment ought to work. And our partners in Davis and Woodland have dealt with this sort of issue as well. But if you spend $25 million on wastewater treatment, and you're discharging your clean wastewater into a canal that has no fish, is not swimmable, and nobody drinks out of it, is it really sensible to spend another $25 million to make that water fishable, swimmable, and drinkable, as opposed to not doing that and taking $15 million of that 25 and just giving it to some actually worthy environmental cause? So really trying to figure out the relative costs to the benefits around some of these regulations. So there's been an invitation by the new administration and by EPA for suggestions about how to correct some of these challenges, which I have been supportive of and identified few of them, but just as and also I've tried to counsel some caution, or a lot of caution, around not providing the fodder for the elimination of the water quality frameworks that we also care about as users of the water. So this is one of those national issues that is requiring a lot of surgical intervention, but there may be some opportunities for us and for some of our partners there. On the plus side, we were invited to participate. Metro Edge, the kind of the kids arm of the Metro Chamber, or the Young Professionals arm, did their big conference 2 weeks ago, and they had thanks to Verna Solpiza from our chamber, they did a whole West Sacramento track, essentially for all day, three or four panels in a row. So both the council member Ledesma and I participated at different times during that day, along with some young development partners. And every moment of the panels I was on was folks in that industry extolling West Sacramento's virtues as a place to just do business, to get things accomplished, to build things, to get clarity and certainty, and no nonsense, and it's not too expensive, and they love Randy, and at one point I knew they were lying, because they said that they love the planning department and the building department so much, because when they come to our building department, people here at the building department say, "How can we help you? It'll be 5 minutes, but how can we help you?" And they're used to going to cities where they say, "Take a number, it could be 3 hours, and don't expect that we're going to solve your problem." I believe that part, and then they said, "Sometimes we like it, the building department, so much that we'll just take our lunch and just sit in the building department lobby area, even if we don't have a permit application," which that seemed, I know they said that during your panel, Mr. Ledesma, that seemed a little unbelievable to me, but still, just the ringing endorsement of how, about, it doesn't mean they get their way every time, not at all, but their ringing endorsement of their experience as customers in City Hall was really reassuring. So thanks to our staff team for creating and curating and sustaining that kind of reputation. And then finally, the SACOG board meets tomorrow, and there are two key items I want to make sure the council is aware of. First is, I think I've mentioned that we're having to set new targets for SB 375 greenhouse gas reductions. The state is going in the process of setting those new targets, and the state wants to set extraordinarily aggressive targets. The challenge here is that because of gas prices, driving is up, especially compared to the projections that underlied our previous greenhouse gas reduction targets. So driving is up, despite the fact that we're changing land use and doing other things, because the price is lower. And then second, gas tax revenue is down for exactly the same reason. And so our ability to invest in better transit and more walkability and all of that, because of the transportation funding cuts that are resulted from gas tax revenue reductions, those twin things have caused a double-barreled problem on our targets, and the state's not meeting all the targets in other domains either. So we had a raucous debate about this at the SACOG Transportation Committee, because there are some folks in our region and in our county that would like us to set the most aggressive targets possible. My point of view is that we ought to set the most aggressive targets possible, but with emphasis on the possible part, because you don't actually get anything more for setting a more aggressive target. And if we set a target that's too high and then don't meet it, we compromise our ability to compete for things. There are categories, for example, the cap and trade funds that we would be ineligible for if we don't meet our targets, which would put us on a downward spiral to never meet those targets. So the Transportation Committee recommended unanimously that we seek a target of 18% from the State Air Resources Board. In the abstract, that probably doesn't mean anything to anybody, but it is a very aggressive target, and it does require accelerated transit-oriented development along the streetcar line and in the Bridge District and elsewhere in the urban parts of the redeveloping urban parts of the city. And so the regions and the state's stake in both what our plans are, but also in intensifying our plans, is about to step up a level. So the vote on that request will be tomorrow. We still have to negotiate it with the State Air Resources Board. The other item that's up tomorrow is approval of the agreement for the regional bike share program. The council obviously knows at the last meeting, council approved authorization to negotiate an agreement with Lime Bike. The city manager concluded those negotiations last week, and at the council's at least implicit direction, have held final signature on that agreement pending the continued work on the regional regional system, to assure that either they align with each other, or that if one is superior, that we're choosing the superior one. And a huge amount of progress has been made on that in terms of the regional negotiations. The regional plan, compared to where we were before the council took its action, is dramatically different. The cost per ride for customers in the regional system would be much lower than it would have been before. The public subsidy will be much less and instead directed to more bike racks. I want to say close to 4,000 additional bike rack slots in the region, and a variety of other improvements. So pretty much everyone that's watching this that's not been in the negotiations is very pleased with the effect that a little bit of competition has had on this process so far. The final negotiations up to this point have resulted in an agreement that I think is pretty good. There are some areas that still need to be resolved around the longer term, because the agreement provides for a pilot in West Sacramento starting in next month, May 15th, with 50 to 100 bikes at 20 bike corrals in the city. Then that would trigger in May. Then a regional system that would begin in November with a total of 900 bikes, including those in the West Sacramento allocation, would go up to 150. In that system. And you'll recall the original regional bike share plan had no bikes at all until next May, and in West Sacramento it had maybe 30 or 35. So this is a very significant difference in terms of what the region is now contemplating, and both in time and in overall deployment. But there are issues around what happens once the system is in place. There's no guarantees that the system would stay here beyond a few months into the full deployment. So we're still working through some additional details. Today, the Bike Share Policy Committee had its final meeting before tomorrow's board meeting, and we took about 17 split votes on it. The city of Sacramento had originally at our last meeting 2 weeks ago had proposed, and the city of Davis agreed, that there should be this initial pilot, and it should be in West Sacramento, because we were the ones that really needed to move quickly. Today, the city of Sacramento had two representatives, and they did not agree on this any longer. So we have been negotiating, both SOBI, the bike share provider, SACOG, and us have been sort of negotiating behind the scenes around these issues. And based on the direction from the committee 2 weeks ago, which was do all these things, including this pilot in West Sacramento in May. And we've had folks at the Barn and at the Good Project and at Burgers and Brew and Bean and Barrel who have been excited about our bike share process starting next month, based on either Lime Bike or the potential of this SOBI system. So we ran into a speed bump today when the committee, the insistence of one of the Sacramento representatives, voted to strip the pilot out altogether, so there wouldn't be an early start. But we go to the board of directors tomorrow, and it should be should be a fun meeting, and we'll report back on the status of that. That's really now the core difference. Everyone agreed. The points that I made a moment ago about the long-term and what happens to assure that we always have service and that sort of thing, I think there will be universal agreement at the SACOG Board of Meeting that we need to, and that we can fix those. The debate about this pilot will continue to be one tomorrow. But I think ultimately the board is likely to concur that the option that they would prefer that there not be two systems, and that they understand that we want to launch in May, and that we already have people and property owners and others that really want to launch in May. And so we could do that in one of two ways. Either we could sign the agreement with Limebike, and we could also support the regional system longer term, or they could just agree to the pilot here in West Sacramento that the company says it can handle, and that it's no skin off anybody else's back. So I hope that's where we land tomorrow, so that we can reach a final agreement. But that's the state of play at the moment as this continues to evolve. At least other than the meeting today, it's evolved in a better and better direction every single day. Thanks to the council's early leadership on this work. So. All right, if there's no other communications, item 1C is appointments to boards and commissions. Just have one, and you received in your packets on Friday application for the Board of Appeals. And so I would like to nominate Sean Arnold to fill the vacant seat on the Board of Appeals. There's a motion to confirm the appointment. Okay, it's been moved by Councilmember Orozco, seconded by Councilmember Sandin. Seeing no discussion, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. That brings us then to item 2, which is presentation of a proclamation honoring May 4th, 2017 as the Big Day of Giving, led by the Sacramento Region Community Foundation. Is there a motion on the proclamation?
So moved.
It's been moved by Councilmember Sandin and seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Johannesson. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. As our lead philanthropist, giver, supporter of all things charitable and community, and our West Sacramento's principal connection with the Big Day of Giving, and our leader there, I've asked Councilmember Sandin to present the proclamation on our behalf.
Thank you, and I would like to call up from the Bright and Broader Community Action Network, Charlotte Dorsey, who will receive this on behalf of the 10 nonprofits who are located here in West Sacramento that are participating in the Big Day of Giving. And I'll share a little bit about the Big Day of Giving. Our council and the city and our community has supported the Big Day of Giving the last several years that it's existed, and its key mission is to have 24 hours where anyone in our region can, and around the world actually, we get donations around the world, can support one of our 600 nonprofits that are participating this year in the Big Day of Giving. Last year we raised even with some little issues with our portal, we raised millions, I believe it's close to $7 million last year for nonprofits in our region, and we're hoping to exceed that this year. So there are more, I think, nonprofits that have participated in the past here, 600 regionally, 79 in Yolo County, and then 10 in West Sacramento. And the ones around us, the 10 in West Sacramento, of course, are near and dear to our heart, but we also have nonprofits like the Yolo County Children's Alliance, the Yolo Food Bank, the Center for Land-Based Learning. They're also all participating. So there's an opportunity to give to West Sacramento nonprofits as well as others who support work and help our community here. So I'd like to present this proclamation that actually we're recognizing the Big Day of Giving on May 4th to Charlotte Dorsey. Sorry, I don't know which one.
Thank you. I'm honored to be chosen to represent the nonprofits here in West Sacramento. I'm going to call out the names of the organizations in West Sacramento that are receiving this recognition. And if there are representatives from those organizations here, would you please stand until you're all standing, and then we'll give you a little round of applause. The Bright Children International, Bright and Broadway Community Action Network, Creating Opportunities for Educational Development, Creative Living Options Endowment, Health Education Council, River City Rowing Club, Rural Community Assistance Corporation, Sacramento Traditional Jazz Society, Shores of Hope, West Sacramento Friends of the Library. Thank you. There is a common thread among all of these organizations. They all inform, support, and engage our community. They create environments where people can feel safe and respected. And so I just want to say I appreciate all of you participating on this, and on the behalf of Brighton Broader Community Action Network, if you would like to have your events in our newsletter, you would just send us an email. We have one that goes out twice a month to the about 1,500 people, and we're so pleased to be able to support you in all of your events and endeavors in West Sacramento. Thank you.
All right, that brings us then to the consent agenda, which is items 3 through 19. Are there items to remove from the consent agenda or any items for separate question or comment? Okay. We have a memo at the desk on some amendments to the exhibit in item 3. I have a question or comment on 12, 13, and 17.
13.
Anyone else? All right, then item 12 is the consideration of an issuance of a RFP for the Parks and Open Space Master Plan update. And I think this is less maybe it's not a question, I don't know if it's a question, but just and I know the RFP does reference all the prior work that we've done. So we talked about this, I think, the last time when we did the workshop on the item. I think we cannot emphasize that enough. So it's more than just like go back and look at what the other things said, and then do the same thing that you as a consultant do in every single city, and do a whole new needs assessment. And because there's stuff in here that feels like we should have already done. Like, what are we already doing? Full assessment of our services and community needs and all of that. We just keep doing it over and over and over and over again. And so I really. We want to focus the consultant works on stuff that we really need, not the standard package of services that they're used to doing when they normally do a Parks and Open Space Master Plan. So I'm supportive of doing it, but if you take one more look at the language of it and the scope of it again, just to really emphasize the value adds that we need and not the things that we've just gone through with our general plan update and the trail and recreation, and the trail master plan, the bike master plan, everything else. We keep asking citizens the same thing again, over and over again, and we need to focus our resources on delivering it. So. All right, item 13 is consideration of the first quarter report on the 21st century policing. Councilmember Sandine?
I find these reports incredibly helpful, and I was just wondering if there's anything that the police department would like to pull out and to bring to our attention from this report, as well as, just recently, Ms. Orozco, Councilmember Orozco mentioned the doxing program, which I know wouldn't be found in this report, but I don't know if there's some update you can provide to us in context with this report.
Yeah, as far as the youth efforts that we're undertaking.
Deputy Chief, it's not your first rodeo. It's the buttons on the microphone.
Apparently, I need to be up here more often to learn my lesson. Thank you for that. In addition to the boxing program, as we've undertaken a more focused youth outreach effort to really establish a more meaningful community relationship between the police department and all the communities we serve. It was a great event. It probably exceeded our expectations. But going forward, we actually do have a couple of events planned already. So on Saturday, May 13th, if I have the date correct, the day before Mother's Day, we were actually going to host a free football clinic that's open to boys and girls from 5 to 14. And so we've got even some of our partners that were there during the boxing camp coming out to help us put that on. So we'll have a launch of the registration for that very soon. And so we really encourage everyone out there to take advantage of this. It's a free program, and again, just like the boxing program wasn't about boxing, it was about everything else with life skills development and all the things that really go to the core of our relationship and the foundation that that establishes going forward. That this football clinic will be the same. And then we're underway with planning what our next iteration of Summer Night Lights is going to be. And so that will be coming to fruition, and we'll be pushing dates out on that. And we're also developing the first Police Youth Academy, taking some lessons from our fire department and launching one of those as well, so we can, again, better feed that relationship with the community at the youth level to build into the future.
Thanks. On the RIPA component of the report, are we waiting on RIPA before we'll have the data in the 21st Century Report broken out by race, ethnicity, or beat? Or?
We can actually report just on our outcome data right now, but we actually are just underway on actually doing work on enhancing what we can do from a collection standpoint right now, not waiting for even the large agency mandate, but really finding even something, even if it's just a 50% solution, something to work us towards what will ultimately be the full compliance well ahead of the mandate. So we are underway on developing mechanisms for capturing that data to be able to report more robustly. So that is where we are at progress-wise. Our hope is that within the next 3 months, we will at least have some small bite out of that effort. And so we hope to report more on the actual progress. We can absolutely report on the outcome data as a dashboard or however council wishes regarding the outcomes of arrest, field interviews, and traffic citations.
By race and ethnicity, and yeah.
Yes.
I mean, to me, you can't, in the 21st century, you can't talk about 21st century policing without talking about disaggregating the data by both the geographic areas in the city, roughly approximated by beats, but also race and ethnicity, which I think was one of the principal motivators for the report in the first place. So it's covered a bit in terms of I think of arrests in the RIPA section of the report. And I know the data is incomplete. It's not, there are issues around its accuracy and who's determining race and all that sort of thing. So what the right way to dashboard that is, maybe it's not the specific numbers and the specific percentages, but some, green light, red light, yellow lights, but some indicators that we have to be able to see where the challenging areas are, where areas of progress are. I think is essential for the report. So in advance of RIPA, because RIPA will it's intended to deal with some of those data quality issues as well. But I don't think we can wait for implementation of that law in order to get better at the data at least.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was going to bring that up. I 100% agree. That was at the heart of what we started last year, and I'd like to see it kind of be a regular part of this quarterly report.
Sounds good.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
One more.
Oh, Councilmember Orozco?
Thank you. Deputy Chief, last year we had a large number of traffic-related fatalities. Could you give a report as to where we are with respect to last quarter or the quarter prior?
Around fatalities specifically, I could reference in here, but I believe that we had a substantial drop, thank goodness, in the past quarter. If I can reference this quickly. I don't see the reference specifically to fatalities, but if memory serves, in the last 12 weeks at this point, which may speak to the whole year or the last quarter, that we've only had one traffic fatality in this first quarter of the year, if I recall correctly. And I can be prepared to update council on that specific piece of data at the next quarter report as well.
Did that, based on your recollection, did that involve a bicyclist or two vehicles or one? Do you know?
I don't recall.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And we did have a request for public comment on this item and item 4, which I already skipped, so I'm going to ask Maria Grijalva to come forward and give her comments. If you would start with 13, the one we're on now, since it's the relevant topic, and then we'll go right to 4 and pick up from there.
Thank you for this opportunity to address the City Council. I wanted to thank the Chief McDonald and also the Lieutenant for the boxing program that they just had and for their efforts to do outreach for the community. There were several other organizations that took part that included BB Can, Broderick is a Community Not a Gang, My Nonprofit, Latino Information and Resource Center. And so we cannot thank the chief enough for this boxing program and this outreach that he's doing. I wanted to ask the city and the police chief to please consider doing a moratorium on adding gang enhancements, Penal Code 186, to minors. As you probably know, in West Sacramento, Yolo County, we have the highest rate for charging minors, 13-year-olds, as adults. And so I would beg the city council, under your direction, and for the chief to, of course, take the lead, to please do a moratorium and no longer charge minors under Penal Code 186 under gang enhancements. Thank you so much.
All right.
Item 4.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I think Councilmember Orozco said this last time, but just to clarify, the district attorney is an independently elected countywide official, and the city doesn't have, we don't exercise any discretion in the filing of charges or enhancements here through the city or through the police department itself. So. All right, thank you. That brings us to item 17, which is a consideration of issuance of request for proposals for the Kids Home Run branding and marketing. And I guess I think this is terrific. We had a fairly extensive conversation about this conceptually a month ago when we took up the topic. This is right on target. My only request is that we get a little less specific in some of this area. I mean, like Councilmember Sandine, I work in education, so I know how we can get sometimes, and some of the language about how we're going to focus on, on this group and 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 this group inside the city. We're really trying to raise the level of achievement and expectation across the entire community. And at least for me, part of the point of the Kids Home Run and Measure E is more of a Social Security approach to this issue rather than a categorical entitlement program. In the sense that this is the Kids Home Run is about every child in the city. You don't need to look up, when your child is born, you don't have to look at the birth certificate and say, okay, do I have a Russian last name? Do I qualify for free and reduced price lunch? Do I speak a different language at home? No, you're a West Sacramentan, this is for you. And so I think it's often tempting to start, even in marketing, to start getting really discreet around this. That's a program objective, to make sure that we're reaching all these different communities and making sure nobody's getting left behind. But I wouldn't over-program this in the marketing plan itself. If we simply say we want to reach those kids, those families whose kids aren't going to preschool or aren't getting summer employment or aren't going on to college. This covers that without telling the communications firms who are going to bid on it, who are then going to go out and hire a subconsultant who speaks Russian, and they're going to try to respond to the RFP and try to, that must be 10 points for that. When what we really want from them is their best thinking and their best idea and their best strategy around how to actually get the fundamentals of this program out there in a way that changes perceptions and expectations in the whole community among both parents and schools and employers and everyone else. So good, it's a great job, but I would tune down the details on some of those demographics in particular as we're proving, I think. So.
Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry,
Councilmember
to that end, will marketing materials then be, I understand that this, under the primary target audiences that you referred to, there does say Latino, Russian, Ukrainian communities. But those materials, do you anticipate that they would be in those languages so that we could outreach effectively to the community in West Sacramento?
So not all of them. We're not at the programmatic level for most of the work at this point, right? At the moment, we have preschool. We'll have college savings accounts, hopefully a little bit later in the year. And the college promise component is being implemented at a very small scale, but essentially for students who are already, at this point, for fall 17, already on their way to college, where where, at least from my perspective, where we're at in the marketing campaign is not around necessarily the individual decision. Like, are you aware that this program exists for you? I mean, that is a component of it, but it's not primary. Primary right now is how do we energize potential funders? How do we make sure, how do we energize potential college partners and employer partners and our residents as a whole to say, for West Sacramento to say, look at this amazing thing that we are doing in this community, that the people of the community said that they wanted to launch, to create the energy and the enthusiasm and the broad scale community support that changes the psychology and the attractiveness for others to invest in us. We will also need to market each of the individual components, and each of them will have a different set of exactly those needs, because the demographic slices within our community that are not accessing preschool are not exactly the same ones that aren't accessing paid internships or going to college or whatever. And so we, at the programmatic level, we absolutely need to have this level of demographic detail and targeting and what have you. All I'm suggesting is at the kind of the macro marketing at the beginning, at the rollout of this program, not just the launch, but the rollout over this year, where we're really trying to say to the whole community and to everyone around us, this is the place to raise a child. This is a place where your child's born here in West Sacramento, they are going to succeed. That's the main message, and everyone needs to hear that message, and that will certainly involve the deployment of that marketing being communicated to every nook and cranny of our community, including people who don't usually get heard by traditional means or Facebook or whatever. But I think my only concern is, being somebody who's responded to RFPs like this many, many times, is that when you lead with that, with the details at the beginning, is that people start to write to those details instead of sitting in their room thinking, what is the big play here? What's the big picture marketing play? And then how do you translate that in these ways, as opposed to at the beginning saying, okay, here's 18 different demographic groups that you have to specifically speak to, and tell us how you're going to do that, and each of them will get you 2 points. Mayor Pro Tem Johannesson.
Yeah, just maybe a little bit of a technical question, but on the CMS, are you looking at open source as well?
We did not write it into the RFP.
Okay. My only concern is when you're going proprietary, you have a maintenance issue and a cost issue in open source. I'm just looking through your CMS requirements here, and this is something open source typically can handle, but it may be a cost-saving factor to look at that.
Certainly.
We learned a lot about that during the Code for America process as well, right? That being not over-specifying in these RFPs in order to open up the possibilities. So I think that's makes a lot of sense. Okay. No other comments on that item? Thank you. Then that concludes the questions and comments on the consent agenda. Is there a motion on the full consent agenda, items 3 through 19, including the modifications to the exhibit and item 3?
I'll move the recommended actions.
I'll second.
It's been moved by Councilmember Ledesma, second by Councilmember Roscoe. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. That brings us to item 20, which is a public hearing and consideration of Resolution 17-28, authorizing execution of the joint exercise of powers agreement establishing the Yolo Subbasin Groundwater Agency. Ms. Benner.
Hi, good evening, Mayor, members of the City Council. The purpose of this item is to hold the public hearing for and consider adoption of Resolution 17-28, authorizing execution of the joint exercise of powers agreement establishing the Yolo Subbasin Groundwater Agency. We're also asking that the council authorize the city manager to approve the final agreement exhibits that are being presented here in draft form tonight, assuming there aren't any substantial changes to those. I'll just do a brief presentation before we hold the public hearing, to just kind of give you a background on where we've been and how we got to where we are today. So the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, which is known as SGMA, requires the city to either participate in or make our own groundwater sustainability agency, otherwise known as a GSA, no later than July 1st of 2017. The GSA would then be tasked with developing a groundwater sustainability plan, or otherwise known as a GSP, by January 31st, 2020, that would locally manage and regulate groundwater in the basin. In 2015, the council adopted a resolution approving support of the Water Resources Association of Yolo County, acting as the planning forum to develop a single GSA for this subbasin. And since April of 2016, we've been working with the WRA and other eligible GSA entities to develop the agreement that we're presenting here this evening. The agreements exhibits are in draft form, as I mentioned, because the list of participating members and the associated fee schedule is still being finalized. But once that's finalized, it won't affect our ability to participate in the agreement, nor will it affect the fees that we will be asked to pay. The agreement members will include eligible entities such as the city, under definition of SIGMA, public agencies like the city are eligible entities, as well as affiliated parties, which are not eligible entities under that water code definition, but do have water management, water resource, or land use planning authorities. And that would be entities such as like UC Davis, and they could also participate. Each of these members will receive one voting seat on that board and will also be able to voluntarily leave the agency at any time. However, any eligible entity like the city that leaves the agency would be then required to do an individual groundwater sustainability agency and develop our own individual plan. And as I noted in the report, cost estimates for individual GSA management can be upwards of $565,000, and it could cost upwards of $1.6 million to develop a groundwater sustainability plan. Participation in this agreement will cost the city a $40,000 annual fee for the first 2 years. $26,456 of that are already fees that we pay to the WRA through our membership and groundwater monitoring fees, which leaves a difference of $13,544 that we're going to include in this next biennial budget request. Those fees will be reassessed after the first 2 years, and it's expected they will go down, given that the fact that most of the groundwater sustainability plan will be developed after that 2-year period. So to summarize, participation in this agreement will provide the city with significant cost savings over taking the individual approach. It also provides the benefit of the WRA's experience and knowledge around groundwater and water resource planning. So with that, I'll ask that the council conduct the public hearing for the resolution 1728 and recommend that the council adopt the resolution authorizing execution of the agreement establishing the YOLO Subbasin Groundwater Agency, and also that the council authorize the city manager to approve those final agreements, assuming they don't have any agreement exhibits, assuming they don't have any material changes. I'm here to answer questions, as well as Tim O'Halloran from WRA. Thank you.
All right, and the chair of WRA, who is our representative, before we open the public hearing, would you like to make some
Yes,
comments?
thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Ms. Benner. As the council's aware, I've been bringing forward this process for the past at least 2 years. We've been working very collaboratively with the Water Resources Association and other eligible entities to come together to bring this forward. This meets our obligation to participate in SIGMA. And all of the participating agencies' attorneys also worked collaboratively so that we could actually make sure that this was as good as it could be with all the questions we might ask legally as it was moving forward. I want to thank Pauline Benner and also Ryan Burnett from our staff. They've been really involved with the discussions. And then, of course, Tim O'Halloran from the Yolo County Flood Control and Water Conservation District. We're really fortunate to have him in our county. We're actually a leader bringing this forward. And again, it's a June deadline, but we're doing the process correctly so that we're set up to have the agency formed and then have 2 years to do the planning. So we also worked to create the YOLO subbasin. We were actually not all together in one subbasin, and that work has gone on also the past couple of years. So I, of course, am strongly in support of moving this forward.
Can I ask you, so in the single subbasin, does that make it harder for us to exit if we were ever, as we sometimes get uppity and?
No, so there's actually, there, within the YOLO subbasin, there are actually five parts, because our groundwater is more like Clarksburg. The subbasin is very different hydrologically in different parts, so we're actually clustered and we'll be working closely with more of a like party when we're developing this plan. And there is an exit, I would say an exit clause that's pretty clear, and we could decide to strike out on our own and put our own agency together if we so wished.
Okay, thank you. All right, any other questions before we open the public hearing? All right, thank you, Paulina. Seeing none, we're going to open the public hearing on this. We don't have any requests to speak, but because it is a legal public hearing, does anyone wish to address the council on item 20? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing, return back to the council for any further questions or discussion or motion.
I'll call for a comment and a motion, but I appreciate, thank you. Appreciate Councilmember Sandin's work, leadership on this front. establishing this seems, having been a former board member of WRA, seems like the right direction and really thought through. So staff and our legal staff, thanks for working so hard under your leadership. And as you go, as the JPA goes forward, my only point on JPAs in general, having lived through another one, is just to make sure the amount of focus that you seem to have in getting to this point. I know Councilmember Sandine will be the caution always with JPAs, just to make sure they're run as well as can be, and attention paid to all the nuts and bolts that can seem to override a board that maybe isn't as engaged at all times. So congratulations and job well done. And with that, I'll make a motion to approve the item.
Okay, but it's been moved by Mr. Ledesma and seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Johannesson. Is there any further discussion? All right, seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. Item's adopted. Thank you. Brings us to item 21, which is workshop on water and sewer connection fees. Mr. Blumberg.
So over the past year, the City Council has had a number of presentations on the 2016 update to the water and sewer master plans. At the start, you heard the policy guidelines that would guide the update to those documents. As the documents were prepared, you heard updates on the operational and maintenance costs for the systems, the capital costs, both capital replacement and future expansion. And finally, to the extent that those costs have increased, the City Council directed staff to conduct a Proposition 218 engagement process with the community prior to your consideration of those rate adjustments for current users to the system that's scheduled for May 24th. Tonight is the final piece to the master plans. It deals with water and sewer connection fees, and those connection fees haven't been updated since 2005 for the water master plan, and then since 2007 for sewer. And it's really important that we look at those now that we have the information out of the master plans to update those connection fees. And we also call them developer impact fees, AKA. So, it's real important for the business community, for those who are looking to expand into West Sacramento, for developers who want to build new housing subdivisions. Those costs are all things that they factor into their pro formas. But from a policy standpoint, it's really important to see equity between existing users of the system and those who are buying into the system, the future users. So in effect, the connection fees are intended to make sure that future development pays its fair share of the system. And so what we're doing is we're presenting two workshops to you. We wanted to present the first one tonight so you have a foundation in the methodology and the factors that are used to establish connection fees. And then, as you can see from your agenda report, we outlined a number of policy issues that we intend to bring up at the second workshop on May 10th. And so by doing that, we'll kind of break it up a bit and try to focus in on some of the foundation issues tonight and come back to you in 2 weeks. So we have HF&H, our consultants who are doing the financing sections of both master plans. John Farnkoff is going to go ahead and make a presentation. So with that, I'll just pass it off to John.
Thank you, Paul. Mayor, members of the council, good evening. With me tonight is also Rick Simonson, who's working on this project. Got about a 10-slide presentation for you. Please interrupt me along the way. Do I have a control for this, or? I can do it. Oh, okay, fine. All right, well, here's an outline of what I'm going to try to cover tonight, give you some background just on connection fee principles and law, talk to you about your current connection fees, water and sewer, and then talk about our study approach. Next, please. Yeah. So, as Paul said, connection fees are a type of a development impact fee. The purpose of them is to make sure that the capital costs that ratepayers are born to construct facilities that provide capacity for growth, that those costs, the outlay that ratepayers have made is reimbursed by growth. We want to make sure that by the time somebody becomes a member of the system, connects to the facilities, that they're at an equal level of capital participation. It's a one-time charge that's paid at the time that the connection is made. It is not a rate, it's a development impact fee. It's not subject to Proposition 218, so you don't go through the notification and protest process. There are other names for impact fees, connection fees, and that little box to the right there, but we're all talking about the same thing. Next, please. Yeah. Public agencies are authorized to charge connection fees under the Mitigation Fee Act. The language in that act is spare in telling us what to do. One of the most important things, though, is that in developing connection fees, they need to be reasonable. The language there is plain enough. The charges shall not exceed the estimated reasonable cost of providing service. What we do in developing that cost is we look at not only the cost of existing facilities, but the coming near-term cost of facilities, so that during the period of time that the results of the study and the fees have been publicly noticed, that they keep up with the costs. Typically over the next 5 years, as Paul was saying, it's been a little over 10 years since you studied them last. There may have been some escalation along the way, but now with these master plans giving us fresh data on the coming capital projects, this is an opportune moment to update the fees. Next, please. Now, in the Mitigation Fee Act, there is no mathematical formula or methodology that's prescribed. We just need to make sure that whatever we do is reasonable. And there is some guidance there. We refer to it as the rational nexus test. Basically, it means that there needs to be a reasonable relationship between the fee, the amount of the fee, and the cost of the facilities that will be funded by that fee, and that the fees are going to be used for facilities that are appropriate to the type of development. You wouldn't want to collect water or sewer connection fees and build a library with them. And then finally, that the need for those facilities is also appropriate for the type of development. What we want to do is make sure that we derive the proportionate share of the cost that is attributable to development. Your current water connection fees are shown on this slide. The domestic charges, which single-family residential and commercial and industrial customers would pay, are shown in that box. They're graduated based on the size of the service connection that the customer has, starting at almost $7,900, and you can see that they get to be quite high for those larger connections, of which there are very few. The multifamily connection fees right now are based on a per dwelling unit basis. You see there. You have commercial fire sprinklers that you charge a connection fee for that don't vary based on the size of the fire service. You also provide some credits in certain cases, and how you determine that is really a policy issue, and those credits will be applied against the fees that we calculate, but it's not really within our purview to dictate what those credits will be. You've got some precedents in place, and I think as we go through this and it comes forward, we'll be working with staff to help them determine what the credits would be that they'd want to recommend to you. Some of the credits are related to certain parts of town, and some of the credits are based on the type of, whether it's a green building. Next, please. The sewer connection fees that you charge, it's a different world here. You don't have a water connection, that you can base, you can align the capacity of that water connection with the cost. Here, it's a different story, and the charges are based on different units of benefit, measures of benefit. In the case of single-family connections, it's just charged, per connection. The multi-dwelling units basically have sort of a default 3-bedroom charge, and if there are fewer bedrooms, you discount it 10% per bedroom. The commercial and industrial connection fees are based on land use type, and they're summarized in that box to the right, and they're charged per 1,000 square feet, depending on the type of land use. There's a minimum charge of $3,405, and then you have a charge per fixture unit, which is helpful because any remodeling or additions, expansions that occur can be charged on that basis. Again, with sewer connection fees, there are credits. They're similar to the credits that you have on the water side. Now, the city's capacity fee, connection fees, are for your collection system. That's what people coming here connect to, and that they will be reimbursing the city for. But that doesn't include treatment. The treatment facilities are operated by the Regional Sanitary District, and they have their own connection fee. They determine what it is. You collect it on their behalf as sort of a convenience to them. There are two charges, one for the Northport, and one for the Southport area. That's basically the infill and new development. The multi-dwelling unit connection fee is 75% of the single-family connection fee. And then the commercial and industrial charges are based on not just the capacity for flow that they need, but it also considers the strength of the wastewater. It's very detailed. They have a lot of different customer classes. They determine all of that. You don't have to worry about that with your connection fee because the collection system is really not affected by the strength of wastewater very much. So we'll probably not have to include that in deriving the fee. Next, please. So now in our study approach here, first just to prepare for doing the work, we're going to be talking with staff. We've been reviewing material. We've had conversations already. What we really want to do is just talk to them about the experience that they've had with the connection fee to date. What do they like about it? Whether there are some things that they think should be changed. In this period of time, things have happened. You used to have a wastewater treatment plant. You don't anymore. Are the customer classes and the structure of the charges still appropriate for what you have? Are there any components that are either outdated or that you should be thinking about it that will kind of future-proof the charges at least for the next 5 years? And then finally, what have they been hearing from developers? Are they getting any comments that should be reflected in this update? After talking with staff, we will make some recommendations, talk to them about some things that they should consider. We're always mindful of how important it is for whatever work that we do. It's easy to understand, it makes it easier for developers to accept. You avoid any kind of challenge. We are always looking for simplification. Things are complicated even when they're simpler, and we're not interested in making them more complicated than they need to be. And we can also talk about some things that they might make a little friendlier to developers, or at least not make it unfriendly, just programs that might assist them in paying these charges, for example. We don't want to leave you with something that's impossible to update. We'll prepare a model that can be used for subsequent analysis, and we just want to make sure that this is an easy-to-administer program. And most of all, whatever we do, we want to make sure that it's fully defensible and recovers gross share of costs. The analysis, we're going to use common methodology. It's a combination of the buy-in and incremental approaches. It's similar to what you've had in the past. It's going to try to recover both the proportionate share of the cost of existing infrastructure as well as the next increment of expansion. Basically, we're just trying to determine the average cost of capacity that you need to recover from development. And we're just going to follow a recognized industry standard for doing that. In deriving the connection fee, we've already started to compile the data, and we'll be talking with Paul tomorrow about just to make sure that we interpret it correctly and to get some more. We'll prepare a model. We'll use the model for evaluating alternatives that may need to be analyzed. And we're going to try to maintain consistency between the water connection fees sewer connection fees, and their respective master plans. There are a few variables in the analysis in the sidebar there. How you deal with depreciation is one of them. The treatment of the wastewater treatment plant decommissioning. In-tract facilities, those are facilities constructed within subdivisions that really provide capacity for just the subdivision. You know, how you want to handle those is another question. And there may be other developer contributions, and we just want to make sure that we're handling those appropriately. We don't want to charge developers twice for things, nor do we want things to fall through the cracks. And through all of this, we're going to be hanging our hat on these nexus tests that I mentioned to you at the beginning. Finally, in coming forward with the results, first, we'll work very closely with staff, show them a preliminary analysis and revise it as needed, incorporating their input. We will try to, work with them to distill it down to a single recommended alternative, just to lighten the decision load. There may be multiple alternatives, though. We will make public presentations to the Economic Development and Housing Commission and to the Chamber. I don't know if we will do that or if that will just be for staff. But again, the input that we get may get factored into finalizing our report. If we need to meet with developers, that's also possible. So that's how we see things going.
All right, thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Johannesson?
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. Just a quick question on the wastewater treatment plant decommissioning. Is that nexus supportable to tie it to the rates? Or how does where does the nexus work there? Because you've got an old facility that's not being used anymore. It's not really an expansion of new capacity. It's not the payment of existing capacity. It's cleaning up an old problem. How is that?
Yeah, I think there are two sides to this. To this question. You could liken the decommissioning cost to just a capital cost that has to be borne that was associated with capacity in the city. Similar, let's say, to the post-closure cost for a landfill, where you have to continue to pay for that facility even though it's no longer in service. That's an argument in favor of including the decommissioning costs in the connection fee. The other side of the argument would be that the facility is no longer providing capacity to anybody. It's taken out of service. People's treatment is handled by another agency. How does development receive any benefit from it? Those are the two sides, and I think I would recommend that we write this up for you, to see both sides of the argument in greater detail. Mm-hmm. I think if you were to take the safer conservative side, you wouldn't include it.
All right, thanks.
My frank answer.
Yep.
Yeah, so I was on the council when we did the decommissioning, and I have the opposite point of view, or the first point of view on this issue, because this was the decision against widespread public opposition to proceed with the hookup to Sacramento Regional, which was what induced the closure of this plant. It didn't just happen out of the blue. And it was accomplished so that future development could occur. The city was faced with either constructing a new plant or with hooking up to Sacramento Regional. In either case, the existing plant would have had to have been decommissioned. And just as an oil company that has tanks on the river is going to have to pay it is required to pay for the cost of the cleanup costs of its own facilities. We have the same obligation. And just as it's reflected on that oil company's balance sheet and other their obligations, it is also appropriately reflected on the obligations of the sewer utility within the city. So it is entirely appropriate for both the ratepayers and for connection fees, which should have been in there. It should have been put in there 15 years ago when we made this decision. But it's still an ongoing cost of the sewer utility at the city, and there's no magic about it. Somebody has to clean that up, whether we clean that up tomorrow or we do that in 25 years. It is still a legal obligation of the sewer utility to to provide a fully clean, EPA Superfund compliant site. That's just the, I mean, that is our obligation. So what the magnitude of that is, what the relative shares are, I'm looking forward to the analysis. But to me, it is absolutely clear that we should have done it a long time ago for sure. But it's part of that package that is what allows now for this development to occur at all. Because we wouldn't have been able to do that had we simply maintained the existing plan and not made the decision to switch to regional. Those were not independent decisions by the two agencies. So I'm looking forward to see the analysis on how we do that. Some other things have changed, though, as we're looking at this, because the nexus is the critical piece. But as you indicated, there's lots and lots and lots of assumptions and discretionary decisions that have to be made, because it isn't as though we know exactly that a third bedroom in an apartment is going to generate exactly this, and we know that that's an absolute empirical fact that is indisputable. A set of assumptions have to be made in looking at particular indicators. For the first 20 years of cityhood, the city, for a lot of reasons about our historic land use patterns and our aspirations, had a policy bias against multifamily residential. And so it pretty much at every opportunity, the council made a choice that said if you have discretion, multifamily should pay a little bit more. And single family should pay a little bit less because we want to develop more executive housing. You can quarrel with that at the time or not, but today the world is very different in our community, and one of our deepest market demand needs in terms of housing affordability is apartments. And we're certainly seeing that on the demand side and the pricing side. But our policies, many of them, the embedded policies, the implicit policies, were written 15, 20 years ago when we were a different city with a different policy framework, even before either Mr. Johannesson or Mr. Ledesma joined the council. And so we do kind of have to scrub that back again and modernize those policies to what our objectives are today, which is to promote a diversity of housing in the community, and so not to put our foot on the scale to make it hard to build multifamily. I'm not saying we should be subsidizing multifamily necessarily, but we need to recognize that we spent 20 years trying to do our level best to disincentivize multifamily, and we kind of need to right that scale. Similarly, on the industrial side, 20 years ago, we were doing our best to try to make it as cheap as possible for the kinds of industrial development that we had always had, because that industrial development was the lifeblood of our economy and our workforce and our tax base. And that has also changed to some extent. The kinds of industrial uses, business park uses, the relative mix of them, partly because of automation, frankly, the community benefit of the same heavy water user today compared to 20 years ago is not this. It's not equivalent. I mean, that water user might have employed 400 people in 1997. When I get elected, 1996. Right, might have employed 400 people, and today's employing 40. Again, that doesn't change the nexus, but back then, we were doing every policy that we could to say, hey, we should just incentivize, if you have a choice, burn the apartments and support the, heavy water using industrial development. And we just need to make that more rational today and strip out a policy from a different era when we were trying to accomplish a different set of goals at the time, and where our local economy and the needs of our residents and our companies were a bit different. So I don't have specifics because I don't want to. I want the Nexus study to speak more for itself than it did 20 years ago, or even in 2005, the last time we did the master plan. We still had this mindset, particularly on council, not so much on staff, but on council, that let's do what we can to try to rig the study to the extent that we could against multifamily and in favor of industrial, and we need to get that balance right this time. A related issue is the geographic distinctions that we have made over time, some of which were theoretical, because we were seeing virtually no development north of the Barge Canal, so it was really largely it was like a moral statement to say, yes, let's have a 50% reduction north of the Barge Canal, because it was just a statement about how much we cared and valued the whole city. But there wasn't a whole lot of non-industrial development occurring in the northern portion of the northern half of the city at that time. So a clear-eyed perspective around the dimensions of that geography, I think, are warranted in this new analysis. You could see that a little bit already in the differences in which you described the 50% reductions between sewer and water, which seem to have been written by two different city councils, right? So one of them was, we're going to get 50% reduction, and it's going to apply, I forget what you said, maybe the Bridge District in the Washington neighborhood and the CBD or something. And the other one was, we're going to get 50% reduction in the north, but not counting the Bridge District or the Washington District and Lighthouse, right? So there, in some sense, they were exactly opposite policies around what we were trying to accomplish in the northern half of the city. And I don't know what the right answer is, but it should be, I mean, it should reflect what our objectives are, and it should be, they should be supporting each other, not running at opposite ends any longer. And I don't know that we've really looked at that since 2005, or even if we looked at it in a serious way back then. But now that we have actual development and we can see, okay, are our connection fees having a particular dampening effect in Washington and less so in the Bridge District, or vice versa, or would they be are these the things that are holding us back on Sycamore and West Capitol? Then, you know, we ought to be, whether it's you or our own staff, taking a look at these issues to see what is the right, you know, if we're going to provide a significant incentive, where ought those lines be drawn based on today's conditions and our policy objectives for today. Then the last just sort of technical thing I'd say is we have a utilities commission. They're the primary commission of jurisdiction on this, because the fees are principally related to the needs for the water and sewer master plans. So economic development and housing is perfectly appropriate for them to hear it as well, but the primary commission for this purpose is the utilities, is the commission that's charged with the utilities.
We have made a presentation previously to the Environmental Utilities Commission.
Yeah, no, I think I know, but all I'm suggesting is which one has the primary responsibility, and we're also trying to balance out the workload between everyone but planning as well. So, Mr. Ledesma?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for the presentation and for the approach you're taking with us. That is, you're coming to us sort of at a foundational level of what we're about to embark upon, what you already started to embark upon, and then I think we're having a second workshop. Is that what I'm understanding? Okay. Because this is a unique opportunity, and I agree 100% with the mayor's comments around what you started the show, which was a thinking 15, 20 years ago when this was first started, and where we are today. So for me, the real opportunity in this is something you brought up in your presentation, which is around the opportunity for understanding, and you used the word, the opportunity to simplify where we are. But I really want it to be more about an understanding, because there's so many times this, not recently, I don't hear from developers talking about the impact fees of this. Maybe it's the state we're in, or maybe the policies aren't impacting where we're seeing development, which is in the infill areas. So your comments about understanding what our current policies, what they provide, is important. But I remember 10 years ago talking to folks, and they just I did not understand what the methodology, how we got to these fees, and why they were impacting some and not others, or what they were. So the real opportunity for us, and this has been very educational about breaking down, for me at least, how you break down the methodologies and what components are in them. And most importantly, what I got out of it was the realization that we have to pay for this system, right? And I think most of our constituents, myself included sometimes, forget this, get really good water, which we have, coming through our faucets, to have your sewage work properly. It's a cost for the city, and it's a service we provide. And this is an opportunity to make sure they understand that it takes that. I would agree with the mayor regarding the decommissioning is part of that process. It is, because it's the price of doing business and providing this service. But I think when you go to the commissions, when you go to even, I would urge you to go to the developers, those that are operating here. This is their opportunity to understand, because when time does come for them to develop and they want to knock on our doors, I don't want any misunderstanding that we have to pay for this one way or the other. The fact on your issues, common to both fees, item 2, is that we haven't had much activity over the past, since whatever, 2005, right? Is what you state? what happened at that point? Gee, I wonder. And so I think when that time will come back, and I want a really firm understanding of how we got to this point, so there's no kind of confusion or understanding that what we're trying to accomplish with this and the policy choices that we're going to make. So I urge you to continue the path we're going to visit the other commissions, talk to developers, and I'm not necessarily, certainly want their input. They got to understand them, and they got to know what they're investing in and where we're going to get it. One question I did have is around water connection fees, because you propose, since the fees were not on item 3 under water connection fees in the staff report, you state since impact fees were not generated as estimated since 2005 to 17, we may want to consider increasing the percentage of impact fee going into the buy-in and debt and reduce the percentage on future expansion of the system. And I'm trying to understand that dynamic, because I'm looking at what's currently there. It's almost in thirds. And it's like, and I'm not sure if you're saying the growth component is in my mind, it did not weigh down on us getting fees.
Let me take a shot at putting it in a simple way. Back in 2005, 2007, when the master plans were done, there were, well, particularly for the water master plan, where you had existing debt, a large amount of existing debt related to the water treatment plant. You had assumptions about what would occur in terms of development, what connection fees would be generated over the coming, decade to contribute to that debt and to contribute to, the buy-in component. And, as you noted, there was a recession, that development didn't occur, and so we haven't seen those impact fees come in, those connection fees. And as a result, you've had the users bear the cost, a larger burden of cost in terms of making that debt service and maintaining the system. So the question is, what the policy issue is really going to be whether a larger component of the connection fees goes to make up kind of a catch-up provision to make up for that time period.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. So will you, when you come back, will that kind of proposal come with it? Or an outline of what that might look like?
We'll present options to you of how we could treat it with a catch-up provision and what if you didn't.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilmember Sandin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That was actually one of my questions, Mr. Ledesma, that you just raised. I had circled the same, so that's been answered, and I appreciate that. I appreciate the report. For me, when I was reviewing this, I was asking myself, gosh, has too much time passed before we study this? I started going down that path, but I actually think the answer is no. I think that the time is right now, and so it's coming to us this is coming to us at the right time. For me, I think, and it came up is in your outline of the report that we'll receive, the study that we'll receive, is what isn't working right now. And I think that was outlined as staff getting surveys and getting information for us, because I think that's really important if we're going to make something better. We really need to know what right now isn't working. But to the mayor's point, I think alignment to the general plan, being as competitive as we can be, but also covering the cost is important. And then any kind of simplification we can have, both for those who want to develop here, but also for our staff team, that I think those are important to me.
All right, and it'll be a future item that will have the comparisons, our market comparisons with other jurisdictions on these fees. I've never had a workshop on sewer and water connection fees that didn't have a chart with Davis and Woodland and everyone else.
Yeah, Mayor, that probably won't be at the workshop, because I don't think we're going to have a number at that point, because we want to get policy direction before we develop what a proposal would be. But it would come back, obviously, when we come and make a recommendation to you.
Well, I think that I'm not asking for a proposed number. What I'm asking for is what is ours now, and what are these other jurisdictions now?
We can certainly provide that.
That's
yes.
all. So, because it is, I think part of the reason why we haven't had much to this point, much blowback from the development communities is those, compared to others in the region, especially our closest neighbors, but also some of the other cities where we remain, even with their sense of what the range of possibilities are out of this study, that will remain quite competitive, because the other jurisdictions, especially those jurisdictions that did not make that decision 15 years ago and are still running their own sewer plants, are facing significant cost increases as a result. So we're likely to be very competitive. But it's always been a key policy objective for us to stay in that lane. Because I agree, when I was at this National Water meeting, the point that Mr. Ledesma made about cost is really, I mean, we take water for granted, and we think it should be, essentially free. As I heard mayor after mayor after mayor say, folks would they come to our council meeting, they are, they're really strongly opposed and upset about a $1 change in their sewer rate. Then they go home and they're paying a $25 or $50 increase in their cable bill, which as we've discussed, is almost as an essential utility today, having access to broadband. And it's really uniquely in the sewer and water space in places like here where we've kept costs way down for our residents, but we often take for granted that the regulatory environment, the quality standards that we have to treat to, have ballooned. But we've been able to largely keep the cost profile down for both ratepayers and for developers over time. I also, just to concur with what Mr. Ledesma said, both on this issue, but the lead up to this point, in prior cycles of this, I think we've not had as deep an understanding about what's underneath these numbers, and having both us and our commissions and staff spend so much time over the last several workshops that we've had, really understanding, okay, is that pump station improvement really necessary? Do we need that thing to be generating an additional 1,000 gallons per day, or could we live with 900? But there's, I think, a much stronger sense of clarity around what is actually essential for us to continue to provide effective sewer and water service for our residents and for our economic growth and prosperity over the long run. So it makes it easier to explain to our citizens and to our investment partners why these more modest changes are necessary.
And if I can add to that, the question, I remember a distinct question I received in 2006 regarding why are your impact fees so high? And you don't need them to be that high. Somehow they were egregiously high because West Sac aspires to be too much. That was a real question I received on that campaign year. And I did not have this level of understanding about what goes beneath it. But that's the questioning that comes, is where does that value come from? Where did you come up with that your per door cost to build a home was this much? We knew how it was, and then this is a danger you have when you compare it. We know what it is versus Sac or versus Davis, whatever else, but that doesn't factor in. Yeah, but we have all this other infrastructure we have to pay for now. So I think that's why, to me, it's important that we have this opportunity today to kind of lean those folks in, make sure they have that understanding. You brought up that for your part of the process is to understand our policy choices. And so I'm trying to understand in the process, where is the next workshop where you're going to pose, where these questions are posed? Because we are starting to articulate some of those choices where we're leaning, but as part of the workshop, we bring back by way of the options.
Yeah, that's correct, Councilmember Ledesma. We're going to provide you with the policy choices that are necessary for us to either leave the previous assumptions of the 2005 and the 2007 plans as defaults. We just defaulted the same policy assumptions. An example would be the decommissioning, which was included in the 2007 master plan as something that had a nexus to impact fees. That's an example of one where the policy could change. Another would be, as we noted earlier, do you want to increase the amount of connection fees that is going to pay for catch-up, really? Mm-hmm. So, to catch up for all those years where the users were paying more for debt service and for maintaining the system. And how, part of the discussion we
the mayor brought up earlier was how we approached housing in the past. That's the point I was kind of drawn into, was the predisposition, sort of like it starts with the single family residence, and it's kind of baseline from there, up or down in terms of where we're going. I'm not saying at all that, because there's always that balance about where a single family home residence is the price point is for them versus a multifamily home or whatever. I'm just suggesting that that policy, I think that's the policy point I'm interested in as well. How do you balance that so that you don't stop one or the other? It's not, you just squeeze one side of the balloon and you got a problem on the other. So that's the sort of thing I'm looking for as well, because that was the point I wanted to make. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Johannesson.
Yeah, just when you're coming back and we're looking at the policy decisions, also maybe look at the heavy industrial users and kind of the economic development issue that we have. We've been able to attract manufacturing in this city because of the good water, and not only for residential connection fees, but industrial connection fees on the competitive nature. And then you might have to go outside the region to the competitive rates, because for example, the Japanese manufacturers that have come in, they use a lot of water. They're not just looking at the Sacramento region, they're looking countrywide. And that could be a factor in policy decisions on what we're tacking on in terms of catch up and paying for the system.
All right, well, this is a workshop only, so I think you've gotten sufficient feedback. All right.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, item 22 is a workshop on the City Corporation Yard relocation project.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Council. Going to wait for Chris to call up the PowerPoint, but I'll go ahead and get started. I'm just the warm-up act tonight. I'm going to briefly introduce the item from an economic development perspective and in the context of Pioneer Bluff transition. Randy Goodwin will follow with a discussion of new facility design and cost, and Paul will be back up to conclude staff's presentation about the financing considerations and options for your consideration. So the Courtyard project was prioritized as an early implementation opportunity in the Pioneer Bluff Transition Plan, which the council approved in 2014. Since then, the environment for industrial operations in Pioneer Bluff has deteriorated by design with the completion of the McGowan Bridge and Village Parkway. And we're seeing the private sector respond to these new conditions with business relocations starting to occur. And the most notable example of this is Clark Pacific's recent relocation of their industrial operations to Woodland. So that leaves the city as the largest remaining employer in Pioneer Bluff. So Courtyard is home to approximately 70 city employees in the Public Works and Parks and Recreations departments, and it's the base location for the city's entire vehicle maintenance and equipment fleet. And the Courtyard property, including the wastewater treatment plant facility, which you've been talking about this evening, is about 14 acres, which is 15% of the entire Pioneer Bluff buildable land area, and arguably that property is the cornerstone parcel in Pioneer Bluff. So the city has long recognized the functional obsolescence of those facilities and the need for replacement. So the relocation project really has double benefit. The first being the acceleration of deindustrialization in Pioneer Bluff and positioning a prime riverfront parcel for redevelopment, and that the new facilities would improve the city's, the efficiency and safety of the city's maintenance operations. So in 2015, the port acquired a relocation site for the Courtyard at 4300 West Capitol Avenue, and is prepared to transfer that property to the city when the project is ready for construction. And last year, in 2016, the council approved a contract with Cappy Architects. Ron Cappy's here tonight, but I'm going to hand the baton to Randy to introduce Ron and discuss the design of the facility. So if you don't have any questions for me, I'll hand it off to Randy.
Thank you, Rick. Good evening, Mayor, Council. I'm back. I started this process in 2005, and I'm excited and truly honored to be a part of a high-quality team of staff and consultants. As Rick said, we were able, at your direction, to bring on Cappy Architects. I'll let Ron talk about the vision that he's created from significant input from staff. Multiple departments, most specifically Public Works and Parks. And we drilled down to the chief and facilities worker level. So I think we put together a quality program and schematic design. I'm going to be brief because we have a lot to present, and we'll certainly open it back up to questions. Ron? Yeah.
Thank you, Randy. Ladies and gentlemen, City Council, Mr. Mayor, thank you for hearing this proposal. I've had the privilege of working with the Public Works and Parks and Rec staff to develop this master plan. Extensive input from them for a new corporation yard. We have an image up here of the yard that we are proposing, and we're also proposing this as 3 different schemes so that, you know, for financial reasons. The first scheme would be, well, let me just explain the master plan real quickly. On the street frontage is a 2-story administration building with employee parking to the left. Behind that is a vehicle maintenance facility showing 2 bays. To the right of the admin building is shops and storage building for Parks and Rec and for Public Works. All the rest is lay-down area and parking area. So Scheme 1 comes up, proposes that we build 1 building and that we do temporary portables in lieu of the admin building that we're showing in the plan. It's about 8,000 square foot of portables, about a $2.3 million upfront first cost. We would build the shop storage building. We would leave the maintenance work still going on at Pioneer Bluff. That, all of these concepts presuppose site development, which is about $9 million. So that's for infrastructure and developing the site before we build any buildings on it. The second concept talks about still having the portables, but then adding buildings. So the buildings that get added is a 2-bay maintenance garage, a wash station, and we already have the shop storage building. So each one of these has a separate price tag. I think you have the information in front of you. Scheme 3 is the full build-out of the yard, as you're seeing in this slide. Are there other slides? Yes. Good. Okay. So this is a visualization of what the administration building would be. This is a 2-story building with a mezzanine storage for the storing of city records that are now at the yard. Beyond it, you can see the fleet maintenance building. So this would be the street frontage. It's important to us to, and I think more importantly, to the city, as we heard it, that the building have a good civic presence for West Sacramento. Next. Another view of it showing the shop building to the right, fleet maintenance in the back. Part of the reason for this layout as we developed it was security. so that there's good visibility from the street. Next. Yeah, one more view. Now you're deep in the yard, you're at the fleet maintenance building, and you're looking back at the admin building. Next. Yeah, one more view. Okay. Is this yours? So anyway, thank you, and I'm available for questions.
Thank you, Ron. We'll move next to discussing the financing. I just wanted to wrap up Ron's comments. The phasing is meant to present options for all the obvious reasons. This is an expensive facility, and we've broken it down to a certain degree, and we'll certainly discuss it in greater detail as you wish. Paul?
So, at this point in a feasibility analysis, we're not at a point where we know exactly how we would finance the new corporation yard. So what you've seen in your report in front of you represents some financing options, and I'll briefly run through those. But, needless to say, there are always opportunities and challenges in doing a large project like this. Particularly where the general fund is going to be a major factor in financing that. So, one of the first sources we might look at, we throw out there is, there's the potential that the council may package a number of projects that have a citywide benefit. It could be the corporation yard, it could be a police facility, citywide roadway maintenance. There are things that could be packaged together, brought to the voters. It's a challenge. You need a 2/3 approval, but something like a citywide parcel tax would support that general obligation bond. It has a strong kind of credit rating when you bring that to the market. And it's one way that other cities have chosen to kind of package a number of priority things into one package without burdening existing general fund revenues. And it's a real challenge to get that 2/3 vote. So we're thinking that that's one that you'll have to kind of think about. The water and sewer fund master plans do include proposed contribution to the project, about $5 million combined from water and sewer. This is a very flexible source of funding. You don't have to bond or capitalize right away. Whenever the other financing sources come together, you can also include bonding that would help with the Corp Yard project. Lease revenue bonds are the most likely source of financing. We've done financing like this for City Hall, for Fire Station 45, and we're proposing lease revenue financing of Measure V for streetcar and for flood. So we structured the Measure V lease revenue financing so that the essential services asset, which is the water treatment plant, would be under a master lease so that you could add on, yet another financing, at least from the standpoint of having an essential services asset that could support that. The challenge, of course, is coming up with the revenue to make debt service on those bonds. We did do an analysis, and if we wanted to generate $15 million in net proceeds to the Corp Yard project, it would require about $1 million a year in debt service. And so, obviously, this year, with your analysis of the budget, that there are challenges to the general fund. Perhaps in future years, general fund revenues would be available, but certainly the EIFD would be one potential funding source, and it could be for a few years. The EIFD is a major source of funding for lease revenue bond debt, and then in the future, other sources take over. One source of funding that has been identified for the Corp Yard are the Corp Yard impact fees. And so those impact fees were put in place in 2005. Since that time, we've collected about $1.56 million in fees, just $69,000 last year. So it doesn't generate a lot of revenue. What I would say is that with the preparation of this feasibility study, we would look to you to direct us to update the impact fees based on the new feasibility study. So that's an option. And then finally, one of the proposals that you've seen and considered, I think, is what happens with the proceeds from the sale of 2935 Ramco. That's the property that was purchased to be the new corporation yard, but has since been reconsidered, and the city's looking at disposing of that as excess property. And so if you have a generation of 2.8 million, there's the option of holding those funds aside for this project. Again, that would be the council's option. But what I would say is that obviously with a big project like this, it needs to be considered next to other city council priorities. You have a lot of big projects in front of you, a lot of major projects. And so in the upcoming workshops on the 5-year CIP, you'll have the opportunity to see the Corp Yard, as a proposal along other priorities of the councils. And that completes my presentation.
Councilmember Sandine?
I have a quick question for Mr. Blumberg. Just remind me, I probably should know the answer to this, but what would happen to the proceeds of the current Corp Yard property? Or could there be revenue generated from using that could go towards this project? The current, not the Ramco one, but where it is now?
Yes, exactly. There's some question of when Planner Pluff develops, whether that parcel would be necessary for the financing of the new project that goes there, or whether in combining, selling off property, the city would generate revenues that could then go to the new Corp Yard. That's a very, we've talked about that, but we didn't throw it on the list because it was a recent discussion. Yeah.
This is a scary report to me because it's like all these options are, with one or two exceptions, they're just different ways of getting to the general fund, which we don't have. I mean, you're more optimistic about the future possibility that the general fund will not be in severe deficit state as a result of PERS and a bunch of other challenges that we're facing. But if we're at a $1 million or $2 million challenge there, and potentially increasing given what's happening with the PERS estimates and what have you, the general fund is not likely in the near, and certainly at a point where we might be bonding in some way off of it on an expectation that it would turn around. I think it would be very hard for us to proceed with. And so a lot of the, and obviously the GO bond one has the problems that you mentioned. The lease revenue bonds, to a large extent, the same thing. The impact fees, we already had a deficit. We pay that with the deficit off on that with the sale of property. Then we're down to $800,000 plus $5 million from the sewer and water funds on a project that's at least 4 times that much, or maybe 6 times that much, depending on which of the schemes that we pull. And we've already appropriated $800,000 of that 5.8. I think, or no, maybe that's separate money, but I mean, we're not close, so it's hard to, I'm having a hard time thinking about what the potential gap closures are when the gap is that large in the project. So I'm glad we're doing this, because to kind of put this issue front and center. The EIFD, it isn't our discretionary capital outlay program. It's for the purpose of generating that economic activity and the tax increment. And so, I suppose it's a legal use. I don't really know. But even if it is, it still needs to be able. We still need to be able for our own accounting to be able to know that that's actually going to result in an equivalent amount or more than that in terms of additional tax increment that we're receiving, if we're going to spend money on that instead of on some other project that is likely to create the infrastructure necessary for economic development. So I'm struggling, but I guess that was the point of this item, is to help us understand how much of a challenge this project is really to achieve. And Mayor Pro Tem Johannesson?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, are we currently doing fleet operations or fleet maintenance in the city?
Partially. So Public Works does their own fleet at the Corp Yard, as well as what we call the City Hall pool. police and fire contracted out, and Parks has a mobile contractor which comes out to the site. So it's kind of a hybrid today.
So is this proposal, when you're building this facility, is to bring that in-house?
As an option, so you'll notice on the fleet facility, it's initially designed as a 2-bay structure. We can blow it up to 8, and that would accommodate bringing all citywide fleet maintenance, including police and fire, into the new facility.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a cost consideration of doing that. I think, there's a policy issue of moving that type of maintenance within the city, because right now most of it's done outside in the private sector, which supports local businesses. And so the decision to bring everything back in or into the city, I think, is something that it transcends just a corp yard. It's more of an operation center that we're also looking at here.
Right, and so the full build-out, which Ron described, does not include the 8-bay garage. So if the city were to, desire to move forward with a consolidation, then we would have the flexibility to expand that fleet facility. But the full build-out as contemplated in this report it mimics the existing operation at South River Road.
And that would be under the Scheme 1? Or all
That's
schemes?
Scheme 3. So Scheme 1 maintains the current fleet maintenance at South River Road. So it doesn't get the entire operation off of Pioneer Bluff. So it leaves just fleet maintenance. And the reason for that is that it would eliminate the need to construct that structure on the new site.
All right. I'm concerned too about, the use of general funds and how we're going to end up paying for this. And it's, as we're moving along, we've talked about moving the corporate yard for years and years. But, we're also looking at ways to generate revenue in the city. In that particular part of town, we've talked about the West End development, but that's some time off as a potential retail area. And if you're building more permanent things on there, it seems you're industrializing an area that we want to eventually de-industrialize. So, I can see using temporary buildings, things that aren't going to be more permanent in anticipation of a continued use, but I'm a little bit nervous about creating heavy structures, creating the image of, or the theme of industrialization in an area that, the city may be better served by having retail in the future. It's one of the last big retail areas off the freeway, potential expansion of whatever's going on in the west end of town anyway. And it seems that Scheme 1 would be the lowest impact in terms of permanency. Is that a fair assumption?
Sure. Scheme 1 includes portables for the admin space. It does include a prefabbed, it's a significant structure. I wouldn't describe it as portable, but perhaps interim. And to your comment about the future of the West End, we did scour the city. We did a fairly exhaustive site search. So there are limited options available. So if we chose to not make this a permanent location at the 4300 site, we'd have to identify probably at least a 10-acre parcel somewhere else. That those are hard to come by without doing a land assemblage of some type. There's only one other one that I can think of.
Yeah, I think, now that we kind of know what the cost is associated with this, it hasn't gone for an RFP or anything of that nature. So we really don't know, if the 24 million or 28 million or 16 million is the best price for what we're trying to do here. So how are we going to know that?
Well, so the next step for Ron would be if we identify the funding to build the facilities, Ron would put together a design build bid package, and then we would solicit a design build contractor to build the facility.
Okay, so these are basically just design estimates at this point.
Right, and with Ron and his subconsultants.
Okay.
Right.
All right. And then in terms of the other sites, you said there's just one in the city that would work?
The Sutter Street site that you probably are familiar with, it's north of West Capitol Avenue. It's visible from the freeway. It's kind of, off the beaten path. It's hard to see from West Capitol Avenue, but it's a large site. I want to say 15 to 20 acres, which is underserved by infrastructure. The street and the utilities would require significant upgrading to build at that location, and not to mention site acquisition.
Would that have the effect of helping to rehabilitate that area?
Sure. I think the courtyard, even on the west end, one could argue, would have it would improve the landscape.
For industrial use, though, I think.
Right, but as you saw, I mean, the two-story admin building is a softer, is a more commercial use, if you will. The industrial part of the operation is towards the back end of the site. So we think that two-story admin building would provide some revitalization look to the west end, not to mention the street frontage improvements that would occur, utility undergrounding, and landscaping along West Capitol Avenue.
All right, well, thanks.
What if you co-located a brewery or some other West Sacramento thing there at the location to contribute to the cost? Anyway, Councilmember Ledesma?
Well, yeah, as I have a beer on my dime.
Maybe not at the
Yeah.
driving car lot. But.
Thank you. That line kind of threw me. But look, the way I'm looking at this is, the site map and what you're proposing is the right first step to bring it to us to kind of get us an understanding what we're looking at. So I appreciate the workshop in terms of giving us the site that we've selected and that is purchased as a location for the courtyard, because it is our interest to get it out of the current site in Pioneer Bluff. There's co-equal goals of removing the site from removing the courtyard from the Pioneer Bluff, as well as finding a new site for the courtyard, right? So, and this is the reality of the other half of that decision, right? And so we have choices to make and direction to give, and I think my comments are in line with everybody else's so far, in that we're going to have to find a scalable solution to where it meets the financial needs or requirements that we have. So I'll start kind of with the financing end, is that I too worry about the use of any kind of bonding that exposes the general fund at this point. I'm not saying you don't, you can just, but there's a clear direction of those winds are, we get a lot of headwinds coming our way, and if it's the option, for whatever reason, how's it offset? What do we offset it with? And it's not, and again, knowing there's other external threats that we don't control that are coming to the general fund. So I'm wary of that. I'm not going to be afraid to discuss it as an option, because that's all it is at this point. And the use of EIFD funds for this type of use, or any other type of funds that we have access to, whether it's those funds or Measure G funds or whatever, I get concerned about. I think that those all had inherent uses in mind when we allocated those, or when we authorized the use of those. So how that ties in remains to be seen, and whether EIFD is truly kind of that infrastructure financing. It is for the city, but it required infrastructure to do that. But again, we're going to be scrutinous around it and around the plan that we have around it, and so I appreciate that. I would also say that it is a large space, and while the mayor jokes about adding a brewery to it, as we scale up in the courtyard, are there opportunities for other uses to cohabitate other operations of other agencies or other that would help offset any debt service or any costs of it? Have we considered that?
Yes, I mean, the original courtyard in 2005 was a joint use facility with the school district. That joint use concept is no longer on the table. I mean, frankly, we've completely programmed the property that we have, so there was a concept of sharing with Yellow Transportation, for example. I think Randy would agree that the site is not big enough to accommodate another large user. I would point out that on the site plan, you saw an expansion area to the east. That's about 4.8 acres that the port holds a first right of refusal on. So we definitely covet that property, and I anticipate opportunities to acquire that in the future. So that could introduce perhaps a joint use partner. The other component of the courtyard that we wanted to incorporate, we didn't have room, was police evidence vehicle storage. So another future project is a new police station. It's typical in some cities to put that evidence vehicle storage at a corporation yard. So we view that expansion area as having potential for that.
Okay. And I think those are, as we move forward on this, it's my advice or what I'd like to see is making sure we're exhausting those opportunities. And I know you already thought about YCTD in this and the time, maybe the school district partnership or agreement isn't on the table anymore, but who's to say with everything happening in public finance, it won't be again. We don't know. So I just urge you to kind of keep open to those opportunities because it is a large piece of land and you are planning for expansion on it already. So there may be those opportunities. So thank you.
Councilmember Sandin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I feel like this presentation is really sobering to me because I know that we need this, and yet I think having all of kind of the challenges outlined for us means that we do have to be creative and figure this out. I think we have to figure out how to get the current site to this site that we have identified and purchased. But I just, right now, it's really hard to see the pathway. And I appreciate the challenges being outlined to us. So I also would kind of implore, create even more creativity. We have an incredibly creative staff. And so I think we've been able to find solutions. This one seems particularly challenging just because it is such a big project for us, but it's so important. Having the programming of the facility done, I think, with talking to all the staff members and doing the environmental programming and seeing what would be in that, kind of on that property, it shows me that those are all super important pieces just to the operation maintenance of our city, which is really important to me. So I look forward to continuing the conversation. Right now, when I read this, I thought, oh my goodness, I can't see the solution yet, but hopefully one will emerge in our future discussions.
Yeah, this seems like an issue where if it's going to get solved, it will be 1,000 tiny solutions as opposed to one. So, like the EIFD is an example. To me, it's not a religious question if it's legal to spend the money here, but I don't want to get in. I want to encourage you not to get in the mental space that, well, if we could just get the number, if we get the rest of up to 8 million, then the EIFD will cover the next 20. That's too. I mean, that's not. I'm not voting for that. But if you think about, and same thing on some of these other financing options, if there's a whole bunch of small things that can add up maybe to scheme one, then potentially there's a solution there. But I so far haven't heard anything that we could go all in on that's going to get us close, all by itself, or even close half the gap. So calibrating our expectations. All right, this one's also just a workshop. Randy? Jeez.
Thank you.
Did you win the lottery or something? No.
No, just indulge me, I'm sorry. Just a couple of comments that Rick and Paul aren't aware of, and just being lucky enough to be a part of the whole economic development push and meeting new property owners and property owners that bought the Epi site. I met with them, talked to them. They were really excited about the idea of the city doing something on the West End. And also, the 1,000, thank you, Mayor, I think you're absolutely right, the 1,000 small solutions, we have broken it down, and we look forward to bringing it back and talking to you about those, and working kind of in between the two sites until we can locate onto one site. And we talked about that extensively, and we'll bring that back to you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, and then our third workshop is item 23, which is consideration of a workshop on West Sacramento Transit pilot projects and mobility action plan.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the City Council. Chris Doherty with the Public Works Department. The item before you this evening is a workshop on the transit pilot projects for West Sacramento and our mobility action plan. I'd like to take this time to introduce Sarah Strand, who is currently interning for us. She's going to from the UC Davis ITS Master's Program, and she'll be giving the presentation this evening. And also, once the presentation is concluded, YCT staff, a good majority of them, are actually here to answer any questions that you might have. So with that, I'll turn it over to Sarah Strand.
All right, well, we'll try to complete this before the last bus leaves.
Thanks, Chris. Good evening, Mayor and council members. I'm both excited and honored to be presenting to you for my first time this evening. And I'd like to start my presentation by providing some context for the items you're about to hear about. These projects are aligned with city, regional, and state goals to reduce vehicle miles traveled and greenhouse gases from transportation by providing alternatives to the car. In order to ensure that residents have multiple transportation choices, it's important to coordinate the development of the transportation network with evolving land uses. And this is particularly important in West Sacramento, where we're seeing a lot of rapid development and new growth in the Riverfront District, as well as other planned developments throughout the city. This is also very relevant when considering parking demand management, as providing quality transit and complementary multimodal options can help to alleviate demand for more parking supply and can in turn free up valuable land for development. The city's been going to great efforts to provide more transportation options for residents. However, many communities continue to have only two viable options, which are either driving or taking the bus. And more often than not, residents choose a car if they do have one, because it simply outcompetes the bus in terms of time and monetary costs. For this reason and others, transit has struggled in the city for a number of years, seeing reductions in ridership accompanied by rises in cost. And a good example of where this trade-off in decision-making happens the most is in the southern portions of the city, where many residents do happen to own a car. For example, a resident in Bridgeway Lakes who might have a job in downtown Sacramento could commute 15 to 20 minutes by car versus almost double that, 30 to 35, taking a commute bus. But if they miss a commute bus, their trip is going to be an hour up to an hour and a half. So even after accounting for the cost of parking, most residents in this situation would tend to choose to drive due to the lower cost and the greater flexibility. In addition to travel times, a common challenge related to transit is what's known as the first and last mile gap, which I'm sure you're familiar with. And that refers to the distance a transit rider must travel from their home to a transit stop, as well as from transit to their final destination. A lack of multimodal options tends to limit how transit riders close those gaps. And last but not least, senior mobility is an extremely important issue to keep in mind. As an AARP and age-friendly community, new and innovative models of public transportation could be providing solutions for the growing number of seniors who are choosing to age in place or maybe mobility limited. So the items you'll be hearing about today derive from Council's direction for staff to develop a public transportation strategy in an effort to address many of the issues that I've just mentioned, and was also identified by Council as a top priority on the 2016 strategic plan last year. Last June, staff presented a preliminary approach to developing a public transportation strategy, to which Council actually redirected staff to develop a new approach that would identify near-term transit streamlining enhancement opportunities and to begin to research innovative transportation models outside of a traditional fixed-route bus system. So what you're seeing today is the culmination of staff's work on the public transportation strategy, which is the West Sacramento Mobility Action Plan, or MAP. Council first reviewed the MAP when they elected to make it a top priority in the 2017 strategic plan earlier this year, which directs staff to develop 2 near-term pilot projects and to begin scoping the MAP and identifying grant funding for its development. As you'll hear more about shortly, Pilot 1 is aimed at streamlining traditional fixed route transit and beginning to provide high-quality, reliable service to the growing entertainment district, whereas Pilot 2 is aimed more at exploring innovative, non-traditional mobility services that could potentially supplement transit and provide more options for residents to circulate throughout the city, and both pilots are intended to feed into the overarching MAP. So what is the MAP? Well, it's more than just a plan. The MAP takes a 3-pronged approach to developing a robust, multimodal transportation network and should be looked at as more of an implementation tool for the recently adopted general plan, as well as other plans and initiatives that are underway at the city, including the ITS master plan and the Age-Friendly Communities initiative. The Mobility Action Plan will provide a roadmap to guide transportation investments in the city over time by strategically identifying opportunities for transit streamlining, multimodal mobility hub locations, and smart technology investments. What it's really about is ensuring that residents will have choices in how they get around the city and how they connect to the transit network both today and in the future. Ultimately, the MAP will provide the city with a prioritized list of near, mid, and long-term mobility projects, accompanied by recommendations for when and where they should be implemented, which will leave the city very well poised to compete for new and recurring grant funding opportunities, especially as those are increasingly emphasizing multimodal and innovative transportation models. So the foundational layer of the MAP is about streamlining transit in order to make ridership more convenient and appealing for residents. By improving the operational efficiency of the transit network, the city can reallocate some resources towards expanding those complementary mode choices and developing a 21st century mobility system. Shown here is a map of the existing downtown transit service that connects to West Sacramento. Pilot 1 proposes to consolidate several of these routes by creating a streamlined high-frequency downtown shuttle that would operate on the same route as the existing special events Y shuttle. And Pilot 1 is the first step in the development of the MAP per council direction and in response to public feedback received at YOLO bus meetings over the past couple of years. And it proposes 2 key service enhancements. One is the implementation of a high-quality, reliable downtown shuttle service, and 2 is the introduction of peak hour commute service into the Bridge District. So shown here is the proposed downtown shuttle, which would turn routes 40, 41, and 240 into feeder routes for a regular high-frequency downtown shuttle. And what this means is that these routes that are shown in blue, purple, and turquoise would continue to operate along their existing routes within West Sacramento up until they reach the West Sacramento Transit Center, at which point they would seamlessly transition into a downtown shuttle, which is shown in the bold red on the map. The remaining downtown segments of these routes would be eliminated, but downtown access would continue to be served by commuter Route 39, Route 241, and Route 42. In addition, Route 340A, which currently serves the Amtrak station to the CalSTRS and Ziggurat building in West Sacramento during peak hour commutes, would be eliminated. This route has actually seen very low ridership, averaging about 5 riders per day. However, users of this service would benefit from the new downtown shuttle, which would actually provide more frequent service most of the day and would be located only 1 to 2 blocks from the current 340A stop. Residents of the Washington District will also be benefiting from the addition of complementary multimodal amenities that will include bike and pedestrian improvements, beginning construction this summer as part of the Washington District Sustainable Community Infrastructure Project, which is shown on the map in bright green, as well as future bike share coverage, which is shown in yellow crosshatch. Currently, Route 39 provides peak commute hour service from Southport into downtown by way of Highway 50. On March 15th, in response to a staff report on parking, Council directed staff to accelerate transit service in the entertainment district. So in addition to the downtown shuttle, Pilot 1 proposes that Route 39 would be rerouted to serve the Bridge District during peak commute hours. This new service would aim to alleviate some of the parking demands in that district as well. YCTD has proposed 4 service alternatives with associated costs that are shown here on the table. At this time, staff is recommending that council select the cost-neutral option, which would provide 20-minute frequencies of the downtown shuttle operating from 5:30 a.m. to 10:30 p.m. But at the discretion of council, this service level could be increased to meet additional demands down the road. Per YCTD, the soonest these changes could be implemented is July 30th to account for their standard regulations and procedures for modifying routes. So the next layer of the Mobility Action Plan builds off of the transit network to answer the question of how the city should tailor and prioritize multimodal investments to supplement transit service. So what are mobility hubs? The concept of mobility hubs has emerged alongside the growing number of mobility choices. This concept responds to the first last mile problem by bundling travel modes into a menu of choices to help close gaps at and around transit stations and at regional destinations, and in doing so in a way that's sensitive to the land use context. So this allows transit users to tailor their mode choice to their trip needs, especially trip distance. For example, in an urban mobility hub, you might see more wayfinding, bike share, scooter share, or pedestrian infrastructure to supplement short-range trips, whereas in a more suburban or rural setting, you would see more car share, ride share, or park and ride types of amenities. And technology also plays a key role in this idea of mobility hubs by providing the infrastructure needed for innovative mobility models to deploy, such as real-time information kiosks, virtual ticketing, or onboard Wi-Fi. Which brings us to the third prong of the map, which is when and where should the city begin to integrate new and emerging trends and technologies into the transportation network. Private mobility services that emphasize ride sharing and car sharing have been revolutionizing the transportation industry. And I want to acknowledge that staff has actually been very busy conducting rigorous outreach over the past 9 months. So shown here is just a portion of the agencies, both public and private, that staff has been engaged with. Our efforts include reviewing the proposals of the Smart City Challenge finalists, as well as reaching out to other local governments and transit agencies who are actively exploring innovative transit pilots, such as West Salem in Oregon or AC Transit in the Bay Area. Additionally, staff has spoken with a number of private firms who are leading the way in innovation, such as Bridge, Via, Uber, or Lyft, as well as research institutions such as UC Davis and UC Berkeley, who are actually very interested in collaborating on the performance evaluation of a pilot project here in the city. Staff has also been tracking potential funding sources for this effort at regional, state, and federal levels. This third layer of the map would require ongoing monitoring of technologies and trends in transportation, things like universal payment accounts that would allow users to use one card to access multiple modes, or smartphone applications that would allow users to compare trip costs across all available options and be able to see benefits aside from costs, such as physical activity or productivity, and things like autonomous vehicles, which are rapidly advancing. The map would help guide the city by developing a technology readiness and integration plan. So what Pilot 2 proposes is that the City of West Sacramento deploy an innovative, on-demand, flexible transportation service, which is also known as a microtransit system. Flexible transportation services can range in their level of flexibility along a spectrum based on 3 key variables, which are shown here. And what distinguishes a microtransit service is that it right-sizes vehicles based on demand. So rather than operating a 40-foot bus to carry 5 riders, it might deploy a cutaway vehicle or a shuttle van instead. Traditional fixed route transit service keeps all 3 variables, routes, schedule, and stops fixed. However, newer technology-enabled services use models that make one or more of these variables flexible or dynamic and are usually driven by demand. And I wanted to emphasize that this is a generally unexplored arena, but that there are a lot of pilots popping up all over the country that are testing new transit models. And these innovations could be tailored to more efficiently serve lower density areas, or could help meet senior mobility needs in the future. At this time, staff has not yet defined a specific operational model for Pilot 2, but there are many options. The various microtransit models that are illustrated on the slide are described in more detail in your staff report, but you can see how changing the combination of flexible or fixed variables can result in very different service models. West Sacramento's well-contained yet diverse urban transect provides a very unique opportunity to deploy a pilot that would not only harness data on local demand and travel behaviors, but could also serve as a case study to better understand the application of on-demand and microtransit services across a variety of land uses. So at this time, staff is requesting that council authorize staff to release an RFP, a request for proposals, to hear from the experts that have been operating in this arena, which is the private and public mobility service providers, to help inform the optimal service model for the city, which will in turn help to determine the cost and scope of the pilot, which are by and large determined by the scale and geographic extent. Staff has identified 2 potential grant funding sources for this project and proposes to return to council for authorization to apply for those programs as needed. So how does this all fit together? As I mentioned, Pilot 1 would be deployed as soon as July 30th and would be monitored for performance at key intervals over time and would ultimately feed into the transit network that is defined by the Mobility Action Plan. And then pending grant funding for Pilot 2, staff would proceed with the development and deployment of the pilot by next spring and would equally monitor performance, which could allow for adaptive changes to be made along the way as well. A key component of Pilot 2 will be surveys and data collection to better understand resident preferences and travel behavior around transit. And this data would feed into the map to help better define which emerging trends and technologies fit best in West Sacramento or in specific neighborhoods based on land use or other attributes. Staff would continue to define a scope and timeline for the Mobility Action Plan and has identified the Caltrans Sustainable Planning Grant Program as a potential funding source in which it actually may be very competitive. And staff would return to council for authorization to submit an application to that program, for which funding awards would be announced by next summer, allowing for a fall or winter 2018 kickoff for the MAP. At this time, staff recommends that council select a level of service for the Pilot 1 downtown shuttle, authorize staff to release a request for proposals for Pilot 2, and provide general feedback and discussion on the pilot projects and the Mobility Action Plan. This concludes my presentation, and I'd be happy to take any questions at this time.
All right, are there questions before we take public comment? Mayor Pro Tem Johannesson?
Yeah, first of all, very good report. Very good. I think it was, I'm totally supportive of this. Maybe this is for Mike or Terry, but are the buses now, or whatever is going to be the shuttle vehicle, does it have GPS, published GPS coordinates? All right, and is that, is the lead time displayed at the transit center? Because that would, between 15 and 20 minutes, probably not going to make a huge difference. But, for example, I know San Francisco publishes all their bus data, and you can actually look at the app and see where the buses are at a particular time. So if you know something's 10 minutes away, the lead time doesn't mean as much.
Yes, currently our bus system employs a system that has automatic vehicle locator system on all of its buses. We've just recently, in the past 30 days, upgraded that system with the latest technology called Ranger 4s. That technology is then put into the wayside sign system. In the past, not our entire fleet did not have the latest and greatest systems, but they do now and will be employed through both the online app that is available called, or off the Yellow Bus website, and then also on the wayfinding signs.
All right, as we're looking, one of the policies here is to develop some type of smart city initiative. But look at something like this that could actually publish data that the public can access real time to allow, folks to use that data as they see fit. So at this point, it's not accessible, strict the GPS location of each bus by the public?
No, it is publicly accessible right now.
Oh, how do you get to it?
You go to the yellowbus.com website, and there's a link right on the homepage, and you access a mobile website, and then you can select the route that you want to track, and it shows the exact location of the bus.
Okay, but the app is actually doing that interpretation. I mean, getting at the underlying GPS information. So it sounds like it's not. It sounds like you've got an app that's over the top of that.
We have an app that's over the top of it. At a staff level, we have those GPS those locations, and we could make that data available, yes.
Okay. Yeah, and that, and coupled with, the pilot projects, pilot number 2, is to try to, because it is a pilot project, we're going to want to see, how this is working, what are the goals, who's using it, how often it's used, and to see what we can do in terms of exposing more data, as we're moving forward with this. Thanks.
Mr. Ledesma?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Sarah and staff, for this. I just want to step back for a moment, because this did begin with a strategic plan initiative from last year, 2016, and that's where this started. And I do want to give staff a lot of kudos on this, because they continue to work through this. Last year, I think it was last September, we met and had some redirection, and you continue to work to try to find solutions and trying to find the right direction. And we met maybe a month ago, I think it was, to preview this. And certainly the work you've done and the work that you brought to us today for the recommendation was certainly I think in the spirit of what we were aiming for over a year ago now, in terms of what we wanted to see from a kind of a comprehensive look at what the mobility choices. I think a year ago we were just kind of limiting ourselves still to just what the transit service would be. But today it's more about kind of what it would look like. And I remember the discussion we had about this in 2016 was the city as more of a broker, as you will, of services, and taking our cue from other cities that were advancing pilots and other mobility choices. So again, I just want to take the opportunity to thank you. I know we have lots of questions. I think we all want to dig into some of the ideas in here, but it certainly is much further than I had imagined it was when we met a month ago. So thank you for all the work you've done.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is a really solid report and set of recommendations. I have lots of tweaks and other changes I'd like to make to it, but I think the basic thrust of it and the sophistication of it and the approaches and the iterative nature of it is really strong in that sense. The first pilot being an example, I think this is. Maybe it's because I now live in this area, in the area of the entertainment district. I think it's tempting to sometimes, from a governance perspective, to think about trips as all about commuting, and they're not mostly, right? I mean, most of our a large number of our trips are going elsewhere, going grocery shopping, going to Burgers and Brew, going to Bean and Barrel every single day, right? These are the trips, and even Pilot 1 repeats, I think, this notion that okay, we'll have Bridge District service, but it's really to connect to downtown Sacramento. And for the Washington neighborhood, where we're growing lots and lots of housing and new uses, to access any of the rest of the entertainment zone, you need to go west to Jefferson, then go south on Jefferson, then go to the transit center, and then hop on another bus and go. When what we're trying to create in that zone is a place in itself, right? The riverfront zone is a place, and there's no transit connectivity for it. And that's important both for the sense of place, but it's also just important as basic economic policy, because these uses, as they pop up, there's lots of people living in one part of the riverfront, and there's another part of the riverfront where we're seeing coffee shops and restaurants and ice cream stores and other stuff popping up, and they depend on one another and the dynamics of those neighborhoods connecting for that to work. And so I think what is really essential for those neighborhoods is, as much as a downtown shuttle, is a riverfront shuttle. That's high frequency as well, and that is providing that service. It's the combination of those two, maybe, because the riverfront shuttle could then connect to the downtown shuttle at essentially Capitol Yards or Raleigh Field. Then you have the sense that you can go anywhere that you would need to go without needing to have a car, as opposed to thinking, well, I can get to work if I work downtown, but that's really the only trip that's replaceable by a transit thing. So it doesn't change your behavior in that way. So I think a riverfront shuttle really is key, and I know you'll be thinking, well, what does that cost? This is sort of the other layer I wanted to put on it. Is I think three of us were here when we did this, but the Public Works Director, and his predecessors have fought for centuries, since the Roman times, against the use of all TDA funds for transit. Remembering the good old days back when we had excess TDA funds that we could use to support roads, because our road fund is so poor as well. We made a decision that was revolutionary for our own city a few years back, that because of the land use changes that we were making, that we were going to make the leap and decide that we were going to devote all of our TDA to transit so that we could support this new land use pattern. So we did that, and we have actually made 0 transit changes to match the land use pattern. And that was the deal, right? That increment of TDA that was going to go to YCTD to support transit services was for that purpose. And sometimes it can be, we're trying to do at least 2 major things with transit. And it's easy sometimes to get trapped in one or the other, and we have to do both of them reasonably adequately, but we don't have anywhere near enough money to do them both perfectly. And so, actually, there's 3 of them. One is we want to serve everybody who's ever been served ever by transit. And so the fact that there's one person living in Bridgeway Lakes who's taking this bus to get to this place, we must keep that no matter what. Even if we just opened up a 700-person apartment complex on West Capitol Avenue where we might get 300 riders, we still have to keep that legacy service. And that is extraordinarily expensive, and it's the sort of thing that undermines public support for transit because they see empty buses going by. So, but there's that real pressure to do that. And Mr. Ledesma has to deal with that at the YCTD board. I know I did for many years as well. Then there's the second, which is our transit as social policy, which is that we need for transit-dependent riders, or for folks that we assume are or might be transit-dependent, that we need to provide a full range of service for them. And that is true. We don't have the resources to provide the level or the scope of service that we would want to, but that's a clear objective of ours. And the third is we want to support transit as an economic development and environmental strategy by unlocking the power of the land use changes that we've done. And again, we don't have nearly enough money to provide 15-minute headway service to all of those areas either. But we must do all of it. And so when we take each additional incremental dollar and say we're going to continue the pattern we already have, and we're going to serve more transit-dependent riders, and if there's anything left, then we'll serve the new land use pattern. We're missing that balance. And so I think that as we approach the allocation of our resources, for me, we need to pay more. We need to do even more of what you've done successfully here, which is pay even more attention to the productivity of the existing routes, eliminate, reroute, microtransit substitute. I mean, as more of those in order to better serve real transit-dependent riders, populations of transit-dependent riders. I don't mean the individual transit-dependent rider in one neighborhood or another, and to make real the places that we're already creating, which will also have low productivity because we don't have that many people living in the Bridge District or the Washington neighborhood or Pioneer Bluffs or whatever. But we've learned maybe the hard way that we need to have the transit there, and we declared it as policy actually that we need to have the transit there from the outset. So I think by dedicating some of that TDA increase that we've already done and remembering what our purpose in that was, that we could reprioritize the resources necessary to create an appropriate downtown and riverfront shuttle. I support the recommendation on the 20 minutes, but there is a big difference between 15 and 20. in the minds of riders, because 15 is about the point where, when you reach a 15-minute headway, that's about the point you no longer need to be Mike Barnbaum. You no longer need to know what the schedule is. Right, at 20 minutes, you feel like you have to, that's the psychology that's been, investigated by your colleagues at UC Davis and many others all over the country, that there's a big difference between those. So, again, I'd rather have a riverfront shuttle and a downtown shuttle that are both operating at 20 than just one of them that's operating at 15 as a trade-off. But there is a value to getting 15, so that people no longer feel like they have to have the app on their phone and follow the, okay, I just know if I stand here for a second, check my Facebook or whatever, by the time I look up again, there'll be a shuttle or a bus coming by, so that we could accomplish that. So as we're thinking about the evaluation strategies, this notion of the right balance between transit as unleashing individual choice and economics and climate change and all that other stuff, balanced against what I know our friends at ITS and others, transit to social policy has an important role to play. In fact, it's so important, it was the topic of Councilmember Sandine's dissertation, that we get that balance right, that we not only be paying attention to metrics that are primarily social policy and not paying sufficient attention to the market dynamics around how we're driving the land use and location and trip choices by folks. So that leads me to a second comment, which was on Pilot 2. I continue to think that a TNC option should be in that mix, in the RFP or the RFQ or whatever we're going to do. We don't have to choose it ultimately, but this is one of those areas where my social policy friends, they just hate Uber and Lyft for a wide variety of reasons. And whether I do or not isn't the point. The point is people in our community of a wide variety of incomes are voting with their feet or with their phones. And it is foolish to simply, as a matter of declared social equity concern, to not attend to that. And some of the social equity concerns around usage that's the point of what these pilots are about. Okay, if you had a $1 citywide or within a zone fare, what would that look like? So I don't know, I know you have looked at other jurisdictions that have explored some of these, and obviously this is part of the Golden One Center approach as well. But we should not be afraid to put that in our RFQ. So the part of the staff report that says that we're taking that off the table now, that part I don't support. I think that needs to be in the mix. I've learned from this whole bike share discussion that there are institutional interests in protecting public monopolies is very strong, but we need to at least get some feedback. And it may be that the answers we get back don't meet our standards and don't meet our needs, but let's not be afraid to at least ask what those might look like. Because part of what you said was, I think, really important, and I wish you were at South by Southwest with me last month, because there's a workshop on exactly this topic, and it was nowhere near as good as your staff report. But the trip choice, we tend to program trip choice in public policy as though people are particular modes. So, okay, so we need to do this thing for bicyclists, we need to do this thing for people who drive, and this thing for people who walk, and this people who like doing Uber. The point of this approach is that most people are many modes, and that they're a cyclist, but not when it's raining, or they're a cyclist, but not when they go to the grocery store. They want to walk, but this particular time they're running late because they had to wait for the shower or whatever, and they don't want to. They want to have many choices, some of which we don't like for a variety of reasons, but they want to have lots of choices for every trip at any moment, and they might want to have a different choice on Tuesday than they took on Monday, and so having the appropriate balance of those, and from a user perspective, not from a city or YCTD or any other provider perspective, but from a user perspective, how do you do that? And so what you were describing in terms of some of the mobility as a service applications and some of the companies that are helping to integrate those together is really important, that we get in that space, and that, as you saw, that was a big part of what a lot of the Smart City challenge was about. One last thing. You mentioned some of the grant opportunities that are out there. Now, there's also the SB1 funding that would increase our ability to fund transit as well. And shouldn't we be? I feel like we should be deciding right now that this approach, that more of mobility option one and a couple of other things, that we could advance these goals, consciously right now, as opposed to wait for a bill to come from YCTD next year that says, the cost of this bus line is going to go up. But that will happen too. But I feel like now that we can be reasonably certain that this funding source is going to come in a chunk that's large enough for us to make some priority decisions, that we ought to be including that in our mix as well, so that transit can really function in this way. Because we talked about how transit can work with other modes. At least the lessons I've been hearing from the progressive, sophisticated transit folks around the country and regionally is thinking about the transit lines mainly as the trunk service, right? So that as opposed to the lines we have today, which are going snaking all over the place, which are not viable anywhere, is to think about, okay, there's the downtown line, there's the riverfront line, there's the Jefferson line or whatever. But if you think about even buses as being more like streetcar lines, and then all these other things are mainly about how to get to that. And the flip side of that is, no matter how much Uber and Lyft you have, you still need these trunk lines, right? There's no substituting a way for transit, because the congestion and everything else that gets caused by adding all those cars onto those primary corridors can only be solved with some sort of transit, whether it's our traditional one or the ones that are outlined here. But really thinking about not just what does transit look like today, but what is the essential role of transit, and then how does transit essential to all these other things that we want to unlock. So that was a long set of comments to Councilmember Ledesma.
Yes, that was a long set of comments, but it's interesting because I think, and I know we have public comment on this, but I do want to say a lot of the comments you made were exactly ones we had a month ago, we were concerned about the Washington neighborhood being serviced by transit, and how could we accomplish that? And because it is the burgeoning area of town, and there's obviously a place to go. We also thought about what came into option 2 was where would the places that people want to go, right? So there's also the IKEA Center and all the shopping area that's out there has become destination. I know that because that's where my kids go for in and out or whatever, right? So there are places that people go. And I think that's what this opportunity and the flexibility, I think, the learning capability that having these alternative or optional transit choices would be, presents the data that we can learn from and invest in smartly, because that's where the people are going. So I agree with you, and I think we had conversations around exactly what you just said around that we should treat these trunk lines as though they're streetcar lines. And that's how the Y was born, right? We said, let's mimic that. And so staff, both our staff and YCTD staff said, let's just make this permanent. It seems to be working. I've taken it, you've taken it, I know, and it works. We used to wait there every 15 minutes and you're there, you're on. And so the policy question to us is, are we willing to invest on that to get it to the quarter of an hour? So it kind of gets away that. Do we want to do that? Well, that's our choice. That's in front of us. So I think those are all important concepts, and the thing that was so promising where staff came back, and for us at least, is this sort of breaking through that paradigm that we were having, kind of getting caught in that fixed route. We got to move all over the place. You're challenging it even more, which I appreciate, but that's the process, and I think that's the great part about where this proposal is that we're starting to say, okay, what if we could do that, would we? I was, if you can put on the slide that had the map on it, because this perfectly visualized when staff, Sarah and Chris and Denix presented this to me. You can't really see it here. This one, okay. Yes, this one, thank you. You showed this to me a month ago and said, this is something I think this is from San Diego.
Yeah, San Diego Association of Governments.
San Diego, and when we started talking about this a year ago, this is exactly what I had in mind. You have when you walk out the door at any particular place, what are the choices at your disposal? Streetcar, transit, bus, Uber, bike share, and that's what this is trying to articulate. And so the challenge for us is that we haven't conceptualized yet. We're starting to now. Is what would it look like in our area? If you lived in Southport, you walked out your door, is there an opportunity to get to the Bridge District? Is there an opportunity to get to the Washington neighborhood? How would you get there? And the choices you would have, and how would the city, what's the city's role, and how does it get that message or help facilitate that choice that's what's in front of us. So that, to me, that's the real encouraging sign about where we are. And there was a breakthrough, so to say, I think, for us. And there's still more to come. So, again, this has been worth the time. I mean, I know we talked about this last year, but we're certainly at a really critical time. I would agree with you 100% around looking at funding choices for this, because I was just looking at earlier when we were up here at the SB1 funding coming to us, which is coming, and they have what, SACOG sent 15.1 in, I can't read right now, SDA funds, and active 2.6 in active transportation, and 82.5 in state transportation investment. So there's lots of funds available, and the city has coming to us 1.2 million, obviously for road maintenance. But again, there are opportunities that are sending upon us, and if we're close or upon shovel ready for some of these sort of concepts, I would echo your comment that we should be looking for those opportunities.
Yeah, we've got these. I mean, we have two populations that have no choice. And they are the traditional transit-dependent riders as a population, again, not as individuals, and now places that we have built transit-oriented development without providing transit, right? So to me, those are the top, if you look at the top two levels of where we ought to be investing our resources. It's those two, it's not that nothing else matters, but those are the two, and they have different needs, but they all have different needs and different interests than the city as a whole. And we have traditionally based our routes either on, random people at a public hearing, or we've thought, well, where would I want to go? And even those questions, and I appreciate this sort of analysis, because it starts, as you say, okay, let me assume I'm somebody living at Rivermark, an affordable housing project in the Bridge District, and I want to go, I have a set of things that I need to go to work, I need to go to the doctor's office, I need to do and some of those are never going to be viable for bus trips. Like IKEA is actually a good example, but if I eat there, then it is. But if I'm going to IKEA, and I live in the Bridge District, I'm probably buying something that's going to be rather inconvenient to take on the bus. So it shifts this, this mobility hub notion. Okay, that's not a trip I'm going to take that for. So please, YOLO Bus, don't spend money getting me to IKEA when I'm going to go once a year, and I'm not going to I can't take the bus anyway. Unless from our user research, we're finding that people actually want to go there for other purposes. And so really understanding those users in the same way that we have some understanding about transit-dependent riders and their needs without making transit-dependent riders into their problems, which sometimes transit and social policy is about. How do we make sure that somebody that lives in a poor neighborhood can get to a doctor, to a jury appointment, to all the things that we imagine are and we don't think how are their kids going to get to karate or whatever, right? That they have the same daily aspirations and hopes that everyone else does, and we sometimes don't account for that when we're thinking about what transit dependency really means, but really getting access to the great things in life and not just to the essential public and social services. All right, Councilmember Cindy.
Thank you. Thank you for do you want the member of the public? I can hold off. Okay. I'll jump in. Thank you very much for the presentation and for the options that I think these pilots actually are well conceived and laid out well. I think the mayor's given us a lot to think about, and I don't know if the first pilot needs to kind of come back to us. I completely agree after we've gone through discussing parking in the Bridge District, trying to navigate that and to figure out possibly another loop or some other way to navigate between Washington and the Bridge District, I think is something for us to consider. I think the other thing that we'll add into the pilots, sometimes I think you're holding everything else, you hold it all constant, and then you add a new intervention and you take a look, how has this changed? I think we may complicate it because we are adding in bike share, which is something new, and folks may be attracted to that momentarily while we're also adding another intervention. So, I mean, it speaks to this mobility hub concept in a way, but when we're looking at a pilot, it may make it challenging to understand potentially the outcome. So it's just something else, I think, to add into the mix. And I do think, I'm not certain, but I do think we may be ready to move forward for the Pilot 2 RFP, just to get that going. But it sounds like, from listening to my colleagues, that we may want to do a little bit, some little tinkering with the Pilot 1 concept. But I think really, really good work, and I do think that we're moving forward in what we've talked about for the last couple of years, and it will be productive. I'm looking, we have to learn from these too. So we also may have assumptions, and they might not be borne out by what we learn. So I think these two are good opportunities for us to learn how to potentially do better at getting people moved around the city.
Councilmember Roscoe.
Thank you. And Councilmember Sandine said a few of the things that I wanted to say as well. And first off, let me just congratulate you. That was a fantastic presentation. I don't think I've been as excited as I am tonight. Joining the council, I had a pretty fixed mindset as to transportation, mainly because I'm transporting 4 kids. So I remember making a remark like, "Are you kidding me? Am I going to take the kids to school on a bike?" But now I have a renewed sense of what can be. So, one of the things I was envisioning, and this is just to comment on our mayor's remarks regarding the riverfront, is, there's an extra added hassle often when you're going to a River Cats game. Just getting out of the parking lot sometimes can be an extra hour if you're driving, because there's just a lot of bottlenecking going around. But I can imagine, we have a Little League day coming up this Saturday, and if we had a route, the kids could meet at a location at a bus stop, and you'd have, hundreds of kids getting on public transportation to take a trip to the River Cats game. Or you could have your friends meeting at a central location to take a trip to the barn to enjoy a Saturday night or a Friday night of amenities. But every morning I have the great opportunity to go into the West Sacramento Community Center, and I see a lot of folks who are engaged in our active aging programs. Let me rephrase that. I see a few folks, a few very motivated folks. And what I want to see is, I want to see a room full of motivated folks that are enjoying the programs that we're offering there. And many of these folks can't get there. Why? Because maybe they have some type of a mechanism that allows them to ride, like a hover around or whatnot, that they can't get off and on a bus, or they have other mobility issues that prevent them from accessing a bus stop. And I know that programs that you articulated in the Pilot 2 might be the answer for some of these folks who have very unique needs. The one thing I want to know and better educate myself is, you'd mentioned that a lot of them are pilots and there's not a lot of history with respect to the Pilot 2 programs, but are there some that I could look up so that I could best educate myself that might have programs in cities that are similar in demographic and size to West Sacramento?
Yeah, there's a number of pilots out there. They're very diverse. I think it wouldn't be an example that's very similar in terms of scale, but AC Transit in the Bay Area is piloting a point deviation pilot system, which... So it's a point deviation system where basically they've taken their existing fixed routes and they just allow people to reserve a ride on demand, either by calling or online. And they no longer pick people up who are sitting at the curbside. And they've been able to reduce the time it takes for people to travel along that route from 45 minutes to 30 minutes. And it's increased ridership by about 33% since they deployed their pilot back in July. That would be a good one to look up. In terms of senior access, there are a lot more TNC partnerships that have arisen that are more about connecting seniors to transit trunk lines or key transit stations, but there are a couple of pilots that I would have to look back for the exact names, but I want to say maybe in Florida, where they're providing subsidized rides specifically for seniors using Uber or Lyft as a subsidiary of the transit agency.
Well, I'm really excited about the possibilities and the different modes that have been described, and thank you so much for bringing these to our attention.
I know that you've researched even more of those pilots and other alternatives, and so outside of the meeting, this is a council that loves to consume, examples of innovations and lessons and failed innovations and stuff from around the rest of the country. So if you want to, if your internship is lasting past tonight, if you'd be willing to share some of that. All right, we did have one request for public comment on this item, and it's from Mike Barnbaum.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Cabaldon and members of the West Sacramento City Council staff and Yolo County Transportation District. My name is Mike Barnbaum, and I'm the founder of the Ride Downtown 916 grassroots organization. We partner with our other grassroots organization, Crown Downtown, as well as the public-private partnership of the Golden One Center, the City of Sacramento, and Sacramento Basketball Holdings Incorporated. In the first year of the events at Golden One Center, we worked with Yolo County Transit and Golden One and helped to introduce the Y Shuttle. But we're here tonight because we know that there were, in the first year, some bit of inconsistencies after hearing some public interaction, including some from our members. More the question is, okay, when does that operation kick in to special operation from regular operation? What time do I have to know about this? When do I have to know about this? And we realized that the first year of a brand new building, there were some things that we have to look back, and this is one of them, and make some fine-tuned corrections. So we want to go on record and say that we favor elimination of the Ziggurat shuttle. We favor elimination of the Y shuttle. We favor developing a sense of service to the public that's consistent at all hours and all days, so the questions of is there a change in operation or anything doesn't have to come to be. And we think that the work behind the scenes plus our involvement on this has really paid off. We are, Mayor, prepared to recommend the staff recommendation of the 20-minute interval all-day service, but we really appreciate your comments. And if your comments are the views of the council to do whatever possible to do a 15-minute interval going forward, we will work toward that. The riverfront shuttle that you brought up, if that is a goal of the council, we take those comments seriously and we'll work with the district when they take up this item on May 8th at 7 p.m. in Woodland at the district office. We are prepared to be there. So we appreciate this item and are available to you with any questions or anything you may have as we go into our second year of event season starting October 1st.
All right, you're a pro at the 3 minutes. Thanks so much, Mike. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. I want to emphasize one of the points that Councilmember Sandine made, that which was partly a challenge for evaluation, but it's a big plus for implementation, which is the concurrent rollout of bike share and potential downtown and riverfront shuttles, and the extension of the trail, the bike and pedestrian trail from Riverfront to 15th Street. It is all of those things at the same time that make each of them much more likely to succeed. Because as folks are testing these options, and I'd love to. I'll grab one of these bike share things and head over to the Sail Inn or to Bean and Barrel or to a meeting at the church or what have you. So I'm going to do that. But I don't know. Is it going to rain later? I don't know if I'll be able to get back. Or what if it's my first time on bike share? What if I can't get back? Knowing that there's also a shuttle option. Gives you a lot more sense, okay, I'm going to try this out. I'm a little urban pioneer myself. I'm going to give this thing a try. Same thing with the shuttle, knowing that there's still this other option, having those all together. I wouldn't want to be the person at UC Davis trying to figure out which one had which effect, but in terms of actually having it change people's sense of what's possible and how they move around and say, okay, maybe I don't need 3 cars. any longer. It's our best play is doing them all together, so. All right.
I did want to add one comment, Mayor and Council. If you do make a decision tonight to hold off on the decision on the service level for the Pilot 1, it would probably elongate the launch time, and so
If,
this point, we're aiming
Mayor,
for
it sounded from what I heard, and in the staff report, that there's notification when there's route changes that, that YCTD needs to handle.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I'm for the 15 minutes, and it feels like it's achievable given these other funding options, but if we don't have those funds identified and locked down and all of that, I know Mr. Ledesma spends a lot of time on the YCTD budget and our contributions to it and the services that we get out of it as well. I mean, as I said earlier, I can live with the 20 I mean, it's a pretty good start. But if we can get to 15,
I'm sure we can take a look with, work with the finance department and find out, our division, and find a way to fund that. If not, we'll come back.
with finance, you mean, where'd that money come from?
If there's TDA funds.
Oh, okay. All right, yeah. Yeah, TDA, SB1 or whatever, or additional, essentially value engineering of the network that we already have.
Okay.
I think.
I agree.
Because that will make a very strong play if we're able to accomplish those, the things that we've talked about tonight. Mr. Mayor, did you have
Just a
anything?
quick question, I didn't bring it before, but the 20-minute goes to 10:30 at night, and the 15 minutes go to either 6:00 or 8:25. So for me, the 10:30, I think it's going to be important. I think, why are we, if it's 15 minutes, why are we cutting the night too short?
Yeah, I might defer to YCTD on that. If the 20-minute takes off after 8:30, or does the service end?
So the cost estimates in the staff report were some scenarios that were run for that service. We certainly can revise those scenarios to be something different than that the council requested, so.
So they
right-
all can go to 10:30, for example, all the scenarios?
You could, there would be a increased cost for that. So you see a one that is keeping it the same at 20 minutes, and that's revenue neutral. We had the second scenario, which increased the commute time essentially to 15 minutes, and that was $6,305. We didn't run a scenario, if you will, to go till 10:30 at night. We could do that and certainly bring that back to the council.
Okay, yeah.
In this chart, so after the first option, I had read the second option being that there'd be 15 minutes during those peak periods and then 20 minutes during the non-peak periods.
Yes.
I thought that meant all the way to 10:30. Is that not right, though? Does it mean all service would cut off at 6:30?
No, it would go till 10:30 PM. The 20-minute interval would
Okay.
go till
And
10.
is that true on
yes.
all four of these?
Yes, I believe so.
Uh-oh.
Hey, my boss lost one for that one.
Good evening. We don't run all that late now, so it wasn't going to be a considerable extension over what's already happening. The key fix to doing it to 20-minute headways is we're regurgitating existing routes and spreading them out so that you have a frequency that people can start depending on. That doesn't mean the service can't be modified a little bit down the road, but bear in mind, when there is a public hearing and workshop process, it's a big change going from 20 to 15-minute headways, because there are all sorts of implications in terms of things like schedules and the like that would have to be taken into consideration. The other thing I should mention is there is $103 million in SB1 money in the SACOG area under what's called 99313. That's where you'd get the lion's share of your funding under state transit assistance going to each city in the county. And it's something like, between all the cities combined over 10 years, something like $11 million total.
All 22 cities?
No, all Yolo County cities.
Oh, okay. All four of us. Okay. All right.
can I ask you just to clarify? Because I heard you adding something to the pilot one, but is that separate from moving forward now? Or the move from Washington to Bridge District? Or is that something that we would consider later, or?
Given the action that we took on parking, that we said by July 1st, we
Right.
wanted to be running these, I mean, if it's, with all deliberate speed, if it's possible to achieve a riverfront shuttle in pilot one, I think we should proceed with that.
Okay.
So if I were making the motion, which I will not, I would include both of those, and then also, slightly expand the scope of the RFP on pilot two to at least allow folks to
Right.
propose on the TNCs.
But we'd be taking action without, will we have some framework for the budgetary implications?
I think that's what.
That's
I
that's
think
what's
yes
holding
is
me
the answer
back,
to your
yeah.
question. We would be taking it, and I think at least I would want to have staff come back with what the results are. If we can get the process started, can we? I guess we voted tonight on that recommendation, and you would run on the assumption that we want both riverfront and 15-minute increments. Came back to us and it was cost prohibitive for whatever reason that we couldn't find. We could always stop the process, correct? So that's kind of my point. I think we can make the decision without it to get the process going and get them into their process of outreach and whatever else. But we could always, if the budgetary implication came back and we.
Do we know what's, sorry.
That's okay.
I'm sorry, do we know what would be cost prohibitive? Because if we also said, this is what we want, this is as much as we, to give some context, I don't know if that moves things along. Just trying to get
No,
us
I
forward.
think that's exactly right. I mean, if we can't do it, I would love to hear from our YCD partners and Public Works and Finance where we have spent all of the additional TDA funds that we had put into that we had allocated for the purpose of serving transit-oriented developments. If we can now afford not to provide any of that service, I'd like to understand what we did do with those resources, but which were way more than $100,000 or $150,000. So I'm hopeful that it's going to be possible to. I mean, it's the right. I mean, we obviously can't run a service that we don't have the funds for, but. To me, the existing TDA allocation is also needs to be on the table if we can't identify additional resources. I'm fine with the 20 minutes as a start on the downtown shuttle. So that part's cost neutral, and then we can figure out a 20-minute or so or whatever something riverfront shuttle that sticks our flag in the ground.
Yeah.
We don't have to achieve perfection. And
I would agree with that approach. I think that one reduces the amount of uncertainty about. I'd rather try to get a riverfront shuttle, see if we could find a solution for that, and keep the 20-minute. And the thing to keep in mind, too, is that the proposed shuttle, the replacement for the Y shuttle, that is, it is meant to mimic the streetcar. So it's going to go away at some point, or at least to some degree, because the streetcar is coming.
Right.
And so we have to keep that. There's another mix to the menu, Councilmember Sandine, that, again, that will make even more options. So again, we'll see savings in 2 to 4 years whenever we can get everybody on board on streetcar. So I think there's all sorts of problems we can manage, I think.
Well, then we have the riverfront streetcar line that's coming a year after that.
That's true.
Okay. All right. So do you want to make the?
I'll make the motion for recommended action to go forward with. I want to make sure I got this right. With 20-minute on pilot one to include a riverfront shuttle and also amendment to pilot two to try to issue an RFP sooner than later. I'm not sure if that was any more clear than that. Yes.
With the TNC.
With the TNC,
option.
thank you, the TNC option.
I assume the Route 39 is part of it, going through the Bridge District?
Yes, then we'll take the recommendation as it was, correct. It does go through the Bridge District, you're right.
Okay.
Thank you.
So that's the motion by Mr. Ledesma, and Councilmember Santine seconded. Is that clear? Okay. Any further discussion?
If I could just ask a question, on the Riverfront shuttle, we're talking about a 40-foot bus going back and forth on Riverfront, is that the?
I hope not, but
I think we're.
We have an alternative to a 40-foot that would make a stop every block?
How many seats does your car have?
Yeah, my car would work. So we're looking at an alternative from a 40-foot, okay, that'd be great.
yeah.
We'll look at options for a cutaway vehicle or a small van.
Yeah. Okay. Then all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. Thank you. Thanks, Sarah, very much.
Great work. Thank you very much.
All right, council calendar. Berlin.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council. Here are a couple of items that are coming up in the next couple of weeks. This Sunday is the city's Earth Day event at City Hall. It starts at 10 a.m. There'll be lots of activities for families and members of the public to enjoy. On Monday, a little update to the calendar in your packet, the River City Regional Stadium Financing Authority meeting, that's going to be rescheduled to a date to be determined. On Monday, also on Monday, is the City School 2x2 meeting, which was moved to 4 p.m. In order to make room for a reception at the port for the training ship Golden Bear, and that starts at 5 p.m.
Any questions on the calendar? City manager report.
Mayor and council, John Robinson's been working with our federal lobbyist to get you ready for the cap-to-cap trip, which is, I think you'd leave a week from Saturday, April 29th. We've got our advocacy piece in electronic format, so John's been working with the staff to update that, so it's very, very pertinent when you are in Washington. Well, I would just want to point out on the back page, the port has the issue of the emergency dredging that we talked about at the port commission meeting. There's a real opportunity to actually fund a major dredging in the short term, and so we've updated the handout to reference that, as well as kind of update our flood program and the streetcar. And I think you're waiting for input from Holland Knight before we finalize this, so we're almost ready. And then also, as
Congresswoman Matsui's office, did they get a chance to look at it as well?
I don't know,
I think it's worth it.
Running it by them.
I'm noting the funding commitments on the streetcar line, and I know that she's had some concern about referring to 100 million versus 75 million and all of that, and just so that we're in the
we'll make
alignment.
sure she's in the loop.
Yeah, so.
Okay.
Helpful.
And then it's mentioned several times about bike share. May is Bike Month, so our staff is gearing up for that program. Public Works staff is making sure that the bike lanes are swept in anticipation of a lot of use in May. And if we hear tomorrow about the bike share program, we'll incorporate that into our schedule and get that out at the end of the week. Our staff's really gearing up for a great May month.
All right, city attorney report. All right, staff direction from council members?
I actually have, so I've been hearing, and I'm sure we all have, been hearing about potholes around the city, and I think all the roads, because of the rains we've had, and I know, I've heard good things about using the Westside Connect app, and people are right out there filling the potholes. I've been trying to explain to folks I come across and mention this to me, just about the enormous cost of redoing roads. And so as we go through our next budget process, I'm wondering if there's a way we can help educate folks about kind of and I know we get this, we've had street projects come to us and we've talked about them and made decisions, but just in terms of context of the whole budget, I think kind of educating the residents and businesses here just about what a trade-off would be, kind of as we make those decisions, but just trying to figure out how we can help educate folks about some of the costs. Even like tonight, the courtyard. I think people and don't necessarily completely appreciate some of the costs of some of our bigger projects. So again, it's not a exact direction, but just help educating folks about the costs of things in the city. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Any further staff direction from council members? Seeing none. Any future agenda item requests by council members? Seeing none. All right, that concludes this matter. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Oh, I'll second.
Motion made and seconded. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, hearing none. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.